Mr. Hardcastle, you're very particular. Is there not a creature in the whole country but ourselves that does not take a trip to town now and then to rub off the dust a little? There's the two Miss Hoggs and our neighbour, Mrs. Grigsby, go to take a month's polishing every winter.
Aye, and bring back vanity and affectation to last them the whole year. I wonder why London cannot keep its fools at home. In my time, the follies of the town crept slowly among us, but now they travel faster than a stagecoach. Its fopperies come down not only as inside passengers, but in the very basket.
Ah, your times were fine times indeed. You've been telling us of them for many a long year. Here we live in an old rumbling mansion that looks for all the world like an inn, but we never see company. Our best visitors are old Mrs. Oddfish, the curate's wife, and little Cripplegate, the lame dancing master. And all our entertainment, your old stories, Prince Eugene and the Duke of Marlborough. I hate this old-fashioned trumpery.
And I love it. I love everything that's old. Old friends, old times, old manners, old books, old wine. And I believe, Dorothy, you'll own, I have been pretty fond of an old wife.
Oh, no, Mr. Hardcastle. You're forever at your Dorothys and your old wives. You may be a Darby, but I'll be no Joan, I promise you. I'm not so old as you'd make me, but I'm more than one good year. Add 20 to 20 and make money of that.
Let me see. 20 added to 20 makes just 50 and 7.
False, Mr. Hardcastle. I was but 20 when I was brought to bed of Tony, that I had by Mr. Lumpkin, my first husband, and he's not come to years of discretion yet.
Nor ever will, I dare answer for him. Ah, you have taught him finely.
Well, no matter. Tony Lumpkin has a good fortune. My son is not to live by his learning. Don't think a boy wants much learning to spend 1,500 a year.
Learning, quotha, a mere composition of tricks and mischief.
Humour, my dear. Nothing but humour. Oh, come, Mr. Hardcastle, you must allow the boy a little humour.
I'd sooner allow him a horse pond. If burning the footman's shoes, frightening maids and worrying kittens be humour, he has it. It was but yesterday he fastened my wig to the back of my chair that when I went to make a bow, I popped my bald head in Mrs. Frizzle's face.
And am I to blame? The poor boy was always too sickly to do any good. The school would have been his death. When he comes to be a little stronger, who knows what a year or two's Latin may do for him?
Latin for him? A cat and a fiddle. No, the alehouse and the stables are the only schools he'll ever go to.
Well, we must not snub the poor boy now. For I believe we shan't have him long among us. Anybody that looks in his face may see he's consumptive.
Aye, if growing too fat be one of the symptoms.
He coughs sometimes.
Yes, when his liquor goes the wrong way.
I'm actually afraid of his lungs.
And truly so am I, for he sometimes whoops like a speaking trumpet. Oh, here he comes. A very consumptive figure, truly.
Why, Tony! Where you going, my charmer? Won't you give Papa and I a little of your company, lovey?
I'm in haste, Mother. I cannot stay.
You shan't venture out this raw afternoon, my dear. You look most shockingly.
I can't stay, I tell you. The three pigeons expects me down every moment. There's some fun going forward.
Aye, the alehouse, the old place. I thought so.
A low, paltry set of fellas.
Not so low, neither. There's Dick Muggins, the excise man, Jack Slang, the horse doctor, Little Aminadab that grinds the music box, and Tom Twist that spins the pewter platter.
Oh, pray, my dear, disappoint them for one night at least.
As for disappointing them, I should not much mind, but I can't abide to disappoint myself.
Well, you shan't go.
I will, I tell you.
Say you shan't.
We'll see which is the strongest, you or I.
Oh, no! Oh, Bobby! Don't you...
Aye, there goes a pair that only spoil each other. But isn't the whole age in a combination to drive sense and discretion out of doors? There's my pretty darling Kate. The fashions of the times have almost infected her too. By spending a year or two in town, she is as fond of gauze and French frippery as the best of them. Blessings on my pretty innocence. What, dressed out as usual, my Kate? Goodness, what a quantity of superfluous silks thou hast got about thee, girl. I can never teach the fools of this age that the indigent world could be clothed out of the trimmings of the vain.
You know our agreement, sir. You allow me the morning to receive and pay visits and to dress in my own manner. And in the evening I put on my housewife's dress to please you.
Well, remember, I insist upon the terms of our agreement. And by the by, I believe I shall have occasion to try your obedience this very evening.
I protest, sir, I don't comprehend your meaning.
Then, to be plain with you, Kate, I expect the young gentleman I have chosen to be your husband from town this very day. I have his father's letter in which he informs me his son is set out and that he intends to follow himself shortly after.
Indeed. I wish I had known something of this before. Bless me, how shall I behave? It's 1,000 to 1 I shan't like him. Our meeting will be so formal and so like a thing of business that I shall find no room for friendship or esteem.
Depend upon it, child. I'll never control your choice. But young Mr. Marlowe, whom I have pitched upon, is the son of my old friend Sir Charles Marlowe, of whom you've heard me talk so often. The young gentleman is bred to be a scholar and is designed for an employment in the service of his country. I'm told he's a man of an excellent understanding.
Is he?
Very generous.
I believe I shall like him.
Young and brave.
I'm sure I shall like him.
And very handsome.
My dear Papa, say no more. He's mine. I'll have him.
And to crown it all, Kate, he's one of the most bashful and reserved young fellows in all the world.
Oh. You've frozen me to death again. That word reserved has undone all the rest of his accomplishments. A reserved lover, it is said, always makes a suspicious husband.
On the contrary, modesty seldom resides in a breast which is not enriched with nobler virtues. It was the very feature in his character that first struck me.
He must have more striking features to catch me, I promise you. However, if he be so young, so handsome, so everything as you mention, I believe he'll do still. I think I'll have him.
Aye, Kate, but there is still an obstacle. It's more than an even wager. He may not have you.
Papa, why will you mortify one so? Well, if he refuses, instead of breaking my heart at his indifference, I'll only break my glass for its flattery, set my cap to some newer fashion, and look out for some less difficult admirer.
Bravely resolved. In the meantime, I'll go prepare the servants for his reception. Since we seldom see company, they want as much training as a bunch of recruits the first day's muster.
Oh, lad. This news of Papa's puts me all in a flutter. Young, handsome. These he put last. I put them foremost. Sensible, good-natured, I like all that. But then reserved and sheepish. Well, that's much against him. Can't he be cured of his timidity by being taught to be proud of his wife? Yes, and can't I... But I vow, I'm disposing of the husband before I have secured the lover. Oh, I'm glad you're come, Neville, my dear. Tell me, Constance, how do I look this afternoon? Is there anything whimsical about me? Is it one of my well-looking days, child? Am I in face today?
Perfectly, my dear. Yet, now I look again. Bless me. Sure no accident has happened among the canary birds or the goldfishes. Has your brother or the cat been meddling? Or has the last novel been too moving?
No, nothing of all this. I have been threatened. I can scarce get it out. I have been threatened with a lover.
And his name?
Is Marlowe.
Indeed.
The son of Sir Charles Marlowe.
As I lived, the most intimate friend of Mr. Hastings, my admirer. They are never asunder. I believe you must have seen him when we lived in town.
Never.
He's a very singular character, I assure you. Among women of reputation and virtue, he is the modestest man alive. But his acquaintance give him a very different character among creatures of another stamp. You understand me?
An odd character indeed. I shall never be able to manage him. What shall I do? Sure. Think no more of him, but trust to occurrences for success. Oh, but how goes on your own affair, my dear? Has my mother been courting you for my brother Tony, as usual?
I have just come from one of our agreeable tete-a-tetes. She has been saying 100 tender things and setting off her pretty monster as the very pink of perfection.
And her partiality is such that she actually thinks him so. A fortune like yours is no small temptation. Besides, as she has the sole management of it, I'm not surprised to see her unwilling to let it go out of the family.
A fortune like mine, which chiefly consists in jewels, is no such mighty temptation. But, at any rate, if my dear Hastings be but constant, I make no doubt to be too hard for her at last. However, I let her suppose that I am in love with her son, and she never once dreams that my affections are fixed upon another.
My good brother holds out stoutly. I could almost love him for hating you so.
It is a good-natured creature at bottom, and I'm sure would wish to see me married to anybody but himself. But my aunt's bell rings for our afternoon's walk through the improvements. Allons, courage is necessary as our affairs are critical.
Would it were bedtime and all were well.
What, you've never heard of
Silence for a song.
Oh, a song!
He's going to knock himself down for a song.
Go on, song.
Then I'll sing you gentlemen a song I made upon this alehouse, the Three Pigeons.
Hooray!
Let schoolmasters puzzle their brain with grammar and nonsense and learning. Good liquor I stoutly maintain gives Janus a better discerning. Let them cry of their heathenish gods, their lees and their sticks and their stidgeons, their quees and their quays and their quads. They're all but a parcel of pigeons.
Hey!
Da-roddle, da-roddle, da-roll, da-roddle, da-roddle, da-roll.
Camel, da-roddle, da-roll, da-roddle, da-roddle, da-roll.
When Methodist preachers come down, are preaching that drinking is sinful. I'll wager the rascals a crown. They'll always preach best with a skinful. But when you come down with your pence for a slice of their scurvy religion, I'll leave it to all men of sense. But you, my good friend, are the pigeon. Ta-roddle, da-roddle, da-roll, ta-roddle, ta-roddle, ta-roll, ta-roddle, ta-roddle, ta-roll, ta-roddle, ta-roddle, ta-roll. Then come put the jorum about, and let us be merry and clever. Our hearts and our liquors are stout. Here's the Three Jolly Pigeons forever. Let some cry up woodcock or hare, your bustards, your ducks and your widgeons. But of all of the birds in the air, here's a health to the Three Jolly Pigeons.
Hey!
Ta-roddle, da-roddle, da-roll, ta-roddle, da-roddle, da-roll, ta-roddle, da-roddle, da-roll, ta-roddle, ta-roddle, ta-roll. Hey!
Squire got spunk in him.
We loves to hear him sing, because he never gives us nothing that's low.
Ah, damn anything that's low. I cannot bear it.
A genteel thing is a genteel thing at any time, if so be that a gentleman be's in concatenation accordingly.
I like the maximum of that, Master Muggins. What, though I'm obligated to dance a bear, a man may be a gentleman for all of that. May this be my poison if my bear ever dances to but the genteelest of tunes.
Here's to that.
Water Parted or the Minuet in Ariadne.
What a pity the squire's not come to his own. It would be well for all the publicans within 10 miles round of him.
He cotton so it would, Master Slang. I then show what it was to keep Joyce a company.
Oh, he'd take after his own father for that. Oh, to be sure, old Squire Lumpkin was the finest gentleman I ever set my eyes on. For winding a straight horn, or beating the thicket for a hare, or wench, he never had his fellow. It was a saying in the place, he kept the best horses, dogs, and gals in the whole county.
He cotton, when I'm of age, I'll be no bastard, I promise you. I've been thinking of bet bouncer in the miller's grey mare to begin with. But come, my boys, drink about me merry, for you pay no reckoning. Well, Stinger, what's the matter?
There be two gentlemen in a coach at the door. They've lost their way upon the forest and they're talking something about Mr. Hardcastle.
Sure as can be. One of them must be the gentleman that's coming down to court my sister. Do they seem to be Londoners?
I believe they may. They look woundily like Frenchmen.
Then desire them step this way. I'll set them right in a twinkling. Gentlemen, as they might be good enough company for you, step down for a moment. I'll be with you in the squeezing of a lemon. much been calling me Welcome Home this half year. Now, if I'm pleased, I could be so revenged upon the old Grumbletonian. But then I'm afraid. Afraid of what? I shall soon be worth 1,500 a year. Let him frighten me out of that if he can.
What a tedious, uncomfortable day we've had of it. We were told it was but 40 miles across the country. We've come above 70.
Yeah, and all, Marlowe, from that unaccountable reserve of yours that would not let us inquire more frequently on the way.
I own, Hastings, I am unwilling to lay myself under an obligation to everyone I meet, and often stand the chance of an unmannerly answer.
At present, however, we are not likely to receive any answer.
No offence, gentlemen, but I'm told you've been inquiring for one Mr. Hardcastle in these parts. Do you know what part of the country you're in?
Not in the least, sir, but should thank you for information.
Nor the way you came?
No, sir, but if you can inform us...
Why, gentlemen? You know neither the road you're going, nor where you are, nor the way you came. The first thing I have to inform you is that you have lost your way.
We wanted no ghost to tell us that.
Pray, gentlemen, may I be so bold as to ask the place from whence you came?
That's not necessary towards directing where we
No
are to go.
offence, but question for question is all fair, you know. Pray, gentlemen, is not this same Hardcastle a cross-grained, old-fashioned, whimsical fellow with an ugly face, a daughter and a pretty son?
We have not seen the gentleman, but he has the family you mention.
The daughter a tall, traipsing, trolloping, talkative maypole. The son a pretty, well-bred, agreeable youth that everybody is fond of.
Our information differs in this. The daughter is said to be well-bred and beautiful. The son, an awkward booby, reared up and spoiled at his mother's apron string.
Then, gentlemen, all I have to tell you is you won't reach Mr. Hardcastle's house this night, I believe.
Unfortunate.
It's a damn long, dark, boggy, dirty, dangerous way. Stingo, tell the gentleman the way to Mr. Hardcastle's. Mr. Hardcastle of Quagmire Marsh, you understand me?
Oh, Mr. Hardcastle's. Coof, lackadaisy, my masters, you have come a deadly deal wrong. When you came to the bottom of the hill, you should have crossed down Squash Lane.
Crossed down Squash Lane?
Then you were to keep straight forward until you came to 4 roads.
Come to where 4 roads meet.
Aye, but you must be sure to take only one of them.
Oh, sir, you're facetious.
Then, keeping to the right, you're to go sideways till you come to Farmer Moraine's barn. Coming to the farmer's barn, you're to turn to the right, then to the left, then to the right about again, till you find out the old mill.
Zoons, man, we could as soon find out the longitude.
What's to be done, Marlowe?
This house promises but a poor reception, though perhaps the landlord can accommodate us.
Oh, alack, master. We have but one spare bed in the whole house.
And to my knowledge, that's taken up by 3 lodgers already. I have hit it. Don't you think, Stingo, our landlady could accommodate the gentleman by the fireside with 3 chairs and a bolster?
I hate sleeping by the fireside.
And I detest your 3 chairs and a bolster.
You do you? And let me see, what... If you go on a mile further, to the Buck's Head, the old Buck's Head on the hill, one of the best inns in the whole country.
Oh? Ah. So we've escaped an adventure for this night, however.
Sure, you've been sending them to your father's as an inn, be you?
Mum, you fool you. Let them find that out. You've only to keep on straight forward till you come to a large old house by the roadside. You'll see a pair of large horns over the door, that's the sign. Drive up the yard and call stoutly about you.
Sir, we are obliged to you. The servants can't miss the way.
No. I tell you, though, the landlord is rich and going to leave off business. So he wants to be thought a gentleman, saving your presence. He'll be for giving you his company. And he can't, if you mind him, he'll persuade you that his mother was an alderman and his aunt a justice of the peace.
Troublesome old blade, to be sure. But he keeps as good wines and beds as any in the whole country.
Well, if he supplies us with these, we shall want no further connection. We are to turn to the right, did you say?
No, straight forward. I'll just step myself and show you a piece of the way. Mum.
Your heart for a sweet, pleasant, damn mischievous son of a whore.
Well, I hope you're perfect in the table exercises I have been teaching you these 3 days. You all know your posts and your places and can show that you've been used to good company without ever stirring from home.
Aye.
When company comes, you're not to pop out and stare and then run in again like frightened rabbits in a warren.
No, no.
You, Diggory, whom I've taken from the barn, are to make a show at the side table, and you, Roger, whom I've advanced from the plough, are to place yourself behind my chair. But you're not to stand so with your hands in your pockets. Take your hands from your pockets, Roger. And from your head, you blockhead, you. See how Diggory carries his hands. They're a little too stiff indeed, but that's no great matter.
Mind how I hold 'em. I learnt to hold my hands like this when I was a pound drill for the militia. And so, being a pound drill...
Diggory, you must not be so talkative. You must be all attention to the guests. You must hear us talk and not think of talking. You must see us drink and not think of drinking. And you must see us eat and not think of eating.
By the laws, your worship, that's perfectly impossible. Whenever Diggory sees Yeaton going forward, Icardi's always wishing for a mouthful himself.
Blockhead, is not a bellyful in the kitchen as good as a bellyful in the parlour? Stay your stomach with that reflection.
Thank you, worship. I'll make a shift to stay my stomach with a slice of cold beef in the pan.
Diggory, you are too talkative. Then, if I happen to say a good thing or tell a good story at table, you're not all to burst out a-laughing as if you made part of the company.
Then, Icard, your worship must not tell the story of old grouse in the gun room. I cannot help laughing. For the soul of me. We've laughed at that these 20 years.
Well, the story is a good one. Well, honest Diggory, you may laugh at that, but still remember to be attentive. Suppose one of the company should call for a glass of wine. How will you behave? A glass of wine, sir, if you please. Hey, why don't you move?
Because, your worship, I never have the courage till I see the eatables and drinkables brought upon the table. And then I'm as bold as a lion.
What, will nobody move? I'm not to leave this place.
Well, I'm sure it's no place of mine.
You do no mind for sir.
Well, I'm sure it cannot be mine.
Oh, you numbskulls. And so, while like your betters you are quarrelling for places, the guests must be starved. Oh, you dunces, I find I must begin all over again. Don't I hear a coach driving to the yard? To your posts, you blockheads. I'll go in the meantime and give my old friend's son a hearty reception at the gate.
By the 11s, my place has gone quite out of my head.
I know that my place is to be everywhere.
Well, where the devil is mine?
Well, my place is to be nowhere at all, so I goes about my business.
Welcome, gentlemen, very welcome. This way.
After the disappointments of the day, Charles, welcome once more to the comforts of a clean room and a good fire. On my word, a very well-looking house. Antique, but creditable.
The usual fate of a large mansion. Having first ruined the master by good housekeeping, it at last comes to levy contributions as an inn.
As you say, we passengers are to be taxed to pay for all these fineries. I've often seen a good sideboard or a marble chimney-piece, though not actually put in the bill, inflame a reckoning confoundedly.
Travellers, George, must pay in all places. The only difference is that in good inns you pay dearly for luxuries, in bad inns you're fleeced and starved.
You have lived pretty much among them. In truth, I have been often surprised, you who have seen so much of the world, with your natural good sense and your many opportunities, could never yet acquire a requisite share of assurance.
The Englishman's malady. But tell me, George, where could I have learned that assurance you talk of? My life has been chiefly spent in a college, or an inn, in seclusion from that lovely part of the creation that chiefly teaches men confidence. I don't know that I was ever familiarly acquainted with a single modest woman, except my mother. But among females of another class, you know.
Among them, you're impudent enough of all conscience.
They are of us, you know.
But in the company of women of reputation, I never saw such an idiot, such a trembler. You look for all the world as if you wanted an opportunity of stealing out of the room.
Why, man, that's because I do want to steal out of the room. Faith, I have often formed a resolution to break the ice and rattle away at any rate. But I don't know how. A single glance from a pair of fine eyes has totally overset my resolution. An impudent fellow may counterfeit modesty, but I'll be hanged if a modest man can ever counterfeit impudence.
If you could but say half the fine things to them that I've heard you lavish upon the barmaid of an inn, or even a college bedmaker.
Why, George, I can't say fine things to them. They freeze, they petrify me. They may talk of a comet or a burning mountain or some such bagatelle, but to me, a modest woman, dressed out in all her finery, is the most tremendous object of the whole creation.
Stepfather so excited that he can hardly wait. He plans to marry Marlowe off to my sister Kate. My mother's madly hoping I'll wed my cousin Con. My cousin Con is moping, much more of that anon. These two are all confusion, they think they're at an inn. I helped in that delusion, now let the fun begin.
To me, a modest woman, dressed out in all her finery, is the most tremendous object of the whole creation.
At this rate, man, how can you ever expect to marry?
Never. Unless, as among kings and princes, my bride were to be courted by proxy. If indeed, like an Eastern bridegroom, one were to be introduced to a wife he never saw before, it might be endured. But to go through all the terrors of a formal courtship, together with the episodes of aunts, grandmothers, and cousins, and at last to blurt out the broad staring question of, "Madam, will you marry me?" No, no. That's a strain much above me, I assure you.
I pity you. But how do you intend behaving to the lady you are come down to visit at the request of your father?
As I behave to all other ladies. Bow very low, answer yes or no to all her demands. But for the rest, I don't think I shall venture to look in her face till I see my father's again.
I'm surprised that one who is so warm a friend can be so cool a lover.
To be explicit, my dear Hastings, my chief inducement down was to be instrumental in forwarding your happiness, not my own. Miss Neville loves you. The family don't know you. As my friend, you are sure of a reception. Let honor do the rest.
My dear Marlowe. But I'll suppress the emotion. Were I a wretch, meanly seeking to carry off a fortune, you should be the last man in the world I would apply to for assistance. But Miss Neville's person is all I ask. And that is mine, both from her deceased father's consent and her own inclination.
Happy man. You have talents and art to captivate any woman. I'm doomed to adore the sex, and yet to converse with the only part of it I despise. This stammer in my address, and this awkward, prepossessing visage of mine can never permit me to soar above the reach of a milliner's apprentice or one of the Duchesses of Drury Lane. Sure, this fellow here to interrupt us.
Gentlemen, once more you are welcome. Which is Mr. Marlowe? Sir, you are heartily welcome. It's not my way, you see, to receive my friends with my back to the fire. I like to give them a hearty reception in the old style at my gate. I like to see their horses and trunks taken care of.
He's got our names from the servants already. We approve your caution and hospitality, sir. I've been thinking, George, of changing our travelling dresses in the morning. I'm grown confoundedly ashamed of mine.
I beg, Mr. Marlowe, you'll use no ceremony in this house.
I fancy, Charles, you're right. The first blow is half the battle. I intend opening the campaign with the white and gold.
Mr. Marlowe, Mr. Hastings, gentlemen, pray be under no constraint in this house. This is Liberty Hall, gentlemen. You may do just as you please here.
Yet, George, if we open the campaign too fiercely at first, we may want ammunition before it is over. I think to reserve the embroidery to secure retreat.
Your talking of retreat, Mr. Marlowe, puts me in mind of the Duke of Marlborough when we went to besiege Denain. He first summoned the garrison.
Don't you think the Ventredor waistcoat will do with the plain brown?
He first summoned the garrison, which might consist of about 5,000 men.
I think not. Brown and yellow mix but very poorly.
I say, gentlemen, as I was telling you, he summoned the garrison, which might consist of about 5,000 men.
The girls like finery.
Which might consist of about 5,000 men, well appointed with stores and ammunition and other implements of war. Now, says the Duke of Marlborough to George Brooks that stood next to him. You must have heard of George Brooks. I'll pawn my dukedom, says he, but I'll take that garrison without spilling a drop of blood. So...
What, my good friend? If you gave us a glass of punch in the meantime, it would help us to carry on the siege with vigour.
Punch, sir? This is the most unaccountable kind of modesty I've ever met with.
Yes, sir. Punch. A glass of warm punch after our journey would be comfortable. This is Liberty Hall, you know.
Well, here's a cup, sir.
So this fellow in his Liberty Hall will only let us have just what he pleases.
I hope you find it to your mind. I prepared it with my own hands. I believe your own the ingredients are tolerable. Will you be so good as to pledge me, sir? Here, Mr. Marlowe. Here is to our better acquaintance.
A very impudent fellow, this, but he's a character, and I'll humour him a little. Sir, my service to you.
I see this fellow wants to give us his company and forgets that he's an innkeeper before he's learnt to be a gentleman.
From the excellence of your cup, my old friend, I suppose you must have a good deal of business in this part of the country. Warm work now and then at elections, I suppose.
Oh, no, sir, I've long given that work over. Since our betters have hit upon the expedient of electing each other, there's no business for us that sell ale.
So then you have no turn for politics, I find.
Not in the least. There was a time, indeed, when I fretted myself about the mistakes of government like other people, but finding myself every day grow more angry, and the government growing no better, I left it to mend itself. Since that time, I no more trouble my head about Hyder Ali or Ali Corn than I do about Ali Croker. Sir, my service to you.
So that with eating above stairs and drinking below, with receiving your friends within and amusing them without, you lead a good, pleasant, bustling life of it.
I do stir about a good deal, that's certain. Half the differences of the parish are adjusted in this very parlour.
And you have an argument in your cup, old gentleman, better than any in Westminster Hall.
Aye, young gentleman. That and a little philosophy.
Well, this is the first time I've ever heard of an innkeeper's philosophy.
So then, like an experienced general, you attack them on every quarter. If you find their reason manageable, you attack it with your philosophy. If you find they have no reason, you attack them with this. Here's your health, my philosopher.
Very good, thank you, yeah. Your generalship puts me in mind of Prince Eugene when we fought the Turks at the Battle of Belgrade. You shall hear.
Instead of the Battle of Belgrade, I believe it's almost time to talk about supper. What has your philosophy got in the house for supper?
For supper, sir? Was ever such a request made to a man in his own house?
Yes, sir. Supper, sir. I begin to feel an appetite. I shall make devilish work tonight in the larder, I promise you.
Such a brazen dog sure never my eyes beheld. Well, really, sir, as for supper, I can't well tell. My Dorothy and the cookmaid settled these things between them. I leave these kind of things entirely to them.
You do you?
Entirely. By the by, I believe they are in actual consultation upon what's for supper this very moment in the kitchen.
Those pods, don't you? Where's the plate? Come on, come on.
Then I beg they'll admit me as one of their privy council. It's a way I have got. When I travel, I always choose to regulate my own supper. Let the cook be called. No offence, I hope, sir.
Oh, no, sir. None in the least. Yet I don't know how. Our Bridget, the cookmaid, is not very communicative upon these occasions. Should we send for her, she might scold us all out of the house.
Let's see your list of the larder, then. I ask it as a favour. I always match my appetite to my bill of fare.
Sir, he's very right, and it's my way, too.
Sirs, you have a right to command here. Roger, bring us the bill of fare for tonight's supper. I believe it's drawn out. Your manner, Mr. Hastings, puts me in mind of my uncle, Colonel Wallop. It was a saying of his that no man was sure of his supper till he had eaten it.
All upon the high ropes. His uncle a colonel. We shall soon hear of his mother being a justice of the peace. But let's hear the bill of fare.
Well, what's here? For the first course, for the second course, for the dessert. The devil, sir, do you think we brought down the whole joiners' company? Or the Corporation of Bedford to eat up such a supper? 2 or 3 little things, clean and comfortable, will do.
But let's hear it.
For the first course, at the top, a pig and prune sauce.
Damn your pig, I say.
And damn your prune sauce, sir.
And yet, gentlemen, to men that are hungry, a pig with prune sauce is very good eating.
At the bottom, a calf's tongue and brains.
Let your brains be knocked out, my good sir. I don't like them.
Or you may clap them on a plate by themselves, I do.
Their impudence confounds me. Gentlemen, you are my guests. Make what alterations you please. Is there anything else you wish to retrench or alter, gentlemen?
A pork pie, a boiled rabbit and sausages, a Florentine, a shaking pudding, and a dish of tiff-taff-taffety cream.
Confound your made dishes. I shall be as much at a loss in this house as at a green and yellow dinner at the French ambassador's table. I'm for plain eating.
Well, I'm sorry, gentlemen, that I have nothing you like. But if there be anything you have a particular fancy to...
Why, really, sir, your bill of fare is so exquisite that any one part of it is full as good as another. Send us what you please. So much for supper. And now to see that our beds are aired and properly taken care of.
I entreat you'll leave all that to me. You shall not stir a step.
Leave that to you. I protest, sir. You must excuse me. I always look to these things myself.
But I must insist, sir, you'll make yourself easy on that head.
You see, I'm resolved on it. A very troublesome fellow this as I ever met with.
Well, I'm resolved at least to attend you. This may be modern modesty, but I never saw anything look so like old-fashioned impudence.
So I find this fellow's civilities begin to grow troublesome. But who can be angry at those assiduities which are meant to please him? Miss Neville! By all that's happy!
My dear Hastings! To what unexpected good fortune? To what accident am I to ascribe this happy meeting?
Rather let me ask the same question, as I could never have hoped to meet my dearest Constance at an inn.
An inn? Sure you mistake. My aunt, my guardian, lives here. What could induce you to think this house an inn?
My friend, Mr. Marlowe, with whom I came down, and I have been sent here as to an inn. I assure you, a young fellow whom we accidentally met at a house hard by directed us hither.
Certainly it must be one of my hopeful cousin's tricks, of whom you have heard me talk so often.
He whom your aunt intends for you. He of whom I have such just apprehensions.
You have nothing to fear from him, I assure you. You'd adore him if you knew how heartily he despises me. My aunt knows it too, and has undertaken to court me for him, and actually begins to think she has made a conquest.
Thou dear dissembler, You must know, my Constance, I have just seized this happy opportunity of my friend's visit here to get admittance into the family. The horses that carried us down are now fatigued with their journey, but they'll soon be refreshed. And then, if my dearest girl will trust in her faithful Hastings, we shall soon be landed in France, where even among slaves, the laws of marriage are respected.
I have often told you that though ready to obey you, I yet should leave my little fortune behind with reluctance. The greatest part of it was left by my uncle, the India director, and chiefly consists in jewels. I have been for some time persuading my aunt to let me wear them. I fancy I'm very near succeeding. The instant they are put into my possession, you shall find me ready to make them and myself yours.
Perish the baubles. Your person is all I desire. In the meantime, my friend Marlowe must not be let into his mistake. I know the strange reserve of his temper is such that if abruptly informed of it, he would instantly quit the house before our plan was ripe for execution.
But how shall we keep him in the deception? Miss Hardcastle is just returned from walking. What if we still continue to deceive him? This way.
The assiduities of these good people tease me beyond bearing.
My host seems to think it ill manners to leave me alone. So he claps not only himself, but his old-fashioned wife on my back. They talk of coming to sup with us, too. And then I suppose we are to run the gauntlet through all the rest of the family. What have we got here?
My dear Charles, let me congratulate you. The most fortunate accident. Who do you think is just alighted?
Cannot guess.
Oh, Mistress's boy, Miss Hardcastle and Miss Neville. Give me leave to introduce Miss Constance Neville to your acquaintance. Happening to dine in the neighbourhood, they called on their return to take fresh horses here. Miss Hardcastle has just stepped inside and will be back in an instant. Wasn't it lucky, eh?
I have just been mortified enough of all conscience, and here comes something to complete my embarrassment.
Well, wasn't it the most fortunate thing in the world?
Oh, yes. Very fortunate, a most joyful encounter. But our dresses, George, you know, are in disorder. What if we should postpone the happiness till tomorrow? Tomorrow at her own house. It will be every bit as convenient and rather more respectful. Tomorrow. Let it be.
By no means, sir. Your ceremony will displease her. The disorder of your dress will show the ardor of your impatience. Besides, she knows you're in the house and will permit you to see her.
Oh, the devil. How shall I support it? Hastings, you must not go. You are to assist me, you know. I shall be confoundedly ridiculous. Yet, hang it, I'll take courage.
Pshaw, man, it's but the first plunge and all's over. She's but a woman, you know.
And of all women, she that I dread most to encounter.
Miss Hardcastle, Mr. Marlowe, I am proud of bringing two persons of such merit together that only want to know, to esteem each other.
Now for meeting my modest gentleman with a demure face and quite in his own manner.
I'm glad of your safe arrival, sir. I'm told you had some accidents by the way.
Only a few, madam. Yes, we had some. Yes, madam, a good many accidents. But should be sorry, madam, or rather glad of any accidents that are so agreeably concluded.
Never spoke so well in your whole life. Keep it up and I'll ensure you the victory.
I'm afraid you flatter, sir. You that have seen so much of the finest company can find little entertainment in an obscure corner of the country.
I have lived, indeed, in the world, madam. But I've kept very little company. I've been but an observer upon life, madam, while others were enjoying it.
But that, I am told, is the way to enjoy it at last.
Cicero never spoke better. Once more and you're confirmed in assurance forever.
Stand by me then, and when I'm down, throw in a word or two to set me up again.
An observer like you upon life, were, I fear, disagreeably employed. since you must have had much more to censure than approve.
Pardon me, madam. I was always willing to be amused. The folly of most people is rather an object of mirth than uneasiness.
Oh, bravo. You never spoke so well in your whole life. Well, Miss Hardcastle, I see that you and Mr. Marlowe are going to be very good company. I believe our being here will but embarrass the interview.
Not in the least, Mr. Hastings. We like your company of all things. George, sure you won't go. How can you leave us?
Our presence will but spoil conversation, so we'll retire inside. You don't consider, man, that we're to manage a little tete-a-tete of our own?
But you have not been wholly an observer, I presume, sir? The ladies, I should hope, have employed some part of your addresses.
Pardon me, madam. I as yet have studied only to deserve them.
And that, some say, is the very worst way to obtain them.
Perhaps so, madam. But I love to converse only with the grave and sensible part of the sex. But I'm afraid I grow tiresome.
Oh, not at all, sir. There's nothing I like so much as grave conversation myself. I could hear it forever. Indeed, I've often been surprised how a man of sentiment could ever admire those light, airy pleasures where nothing reaches the heart.
It's a disease of the mind, madam. In the variety of tastes, there must be some who, wanting a relish for
I understand you, sir. There must be some who, wanting a relish for refined pleasures, pretend to despise what they are incapable of tasting.
My meaning, madam, but infinitely better expressed. And I can't help observing...
You were going to observe, sir?
I was observing, madam. I protest, madam, I forget what I was going to observe.
I know, and so do I. You were observing, sir, that in this age of hypocrisy... Something about hypocrisy, sir?
Yes, madam. In this age of hypocrisy, there are few who, upon strict inquiry, do not...
I understand you perfectly, sir.
Egad, and that's more than I do myself.
You mean that in this hypocritical age, there are few that do not condemn in public what they practice in private, and think they pay every debt to virtue when they praise it?
True, madam. Those who have most virtue in their mouths have least of it in their bosoms. But I'm sure I tie you, madam.
Not in the least, sir. There's something so agreeable and spirited in your manner. Such life and force. Pray, sir, go on.
Yes, madam. I was saying that there are some occasions when a total want of courage, madam, destroys all of the... and puts us upon a...
Oh, I agree with you entirely. A want of courage upon some occasions assumes the appearance of ignorance and betrays us when we most want to excel. I beg you'll proceed.
Yes, madam. Morally speaking, madam. But I see Miss Neville expecting us inside. I would not intrude for the world.
I protest, sir. I was never more agreeably entertained in all my life. Pray go on.
Yes, madam. I was... But she beckons us to join her. Madam, shall I do myself the honour to attend you?
Well, then, I'll follow.
This pretty smooth dialogue is done for me.
Was there ever such a sober, sentimental interview? I'm certain he scarce looked in my face the whole time. Yet the fellow, but for his unaccountable bashfulness, is pretty well too. He has good sense, but then so buried in his fears that it fatigues one more than ignorance. If I could teach him a little confidence, it would be doing somebody that I know of a piece of service. But who is that somebody? That, Faith, is a question I can scarce answer.
What do you follow me for, Cousin Con? I wonder you're not ashamed to be so very engaging.
I hope, cousin, one may speak to one's relations and not be to blame.
Aye, but I know what sort of relation you want to make me, though. But it won't do. I tell you, Cousin Con, it won't do. So I'll beg you keep your distance. I want no near relationship.
Well, I vow, Mr. Hastings, you are very entertaining. There's nothing in the world I love to talk of so much as London and the fashions, though I was never there myself.
Never there? You amaze me. Well, from your air and manner, I concluded you had been bred all your life either at Ranelagh, St. James's, or Tower Wharf.
Sir, you're only pleased to say so. We country persons can have no manner at all. I'm in love with the town, and that serves to raise me above some of our neighbouring rustics. But who can have a manor that has never seen the Pantheon, the Grotto Gardens, the Borough, or such places where the nobility chiefly resort? All I can do is to enjoy London at second hand. I take care to know every tête-à-tête from the scandalous magazine and have all the fashions as they come out in a letter from the two Miss Ricketts of Crooked Lane. Pray, how do you like this, the head, Mr. Hastings?
Extremely elegant and dégagé, upon my word, madam. Your friseur is a Frenchman, I suppose?
I protest. I dressed it myself. From a print in the lady's memorandum book for the last year.
Indeed. Such a head in a side box at the Playhouse would draw as many gazers as my Lady Mayoress at a city ball.
I vow. Since inoculation began, there's no such thing to be seen as a plain woman. So one must dress a little particular, or one may escape in the crowd.
But that can never be your case, madam, in any dress.
Yet, what signifies me dressing when I have such a piece of antiquity by my side as Mr. Hardcastle? All I can say would never argue down a single button from his clothes. I've often wanted him to throw off his great flaxen wig, and where he was bald, to plaster it over, like my Lord Papely with powder.
You are right, madam. For as among the ladies there are none ugly, so among the men there are none old.
Yet what do you think his answer was? Why, with his usual Gothic vivacity, he said I only wanted him to throw off his wig to convert it into a set for my own wearing.
Intolerable. At your age you may wear what you please, and it must become you.
Pray, Mr. Hastings, what do you take to be the most fashionable age about town?
Some time ago 40 was all the mode, but I'm told the ladies intend to bring up 50 for the ensuing winter.
Seriously? Then I shall be too young for the fashion.
No lady begins now to put on jewels till she's past 40. For instance, Miss there, in a polite circle, would be considered as a child, as a mere maker of samplers.
And yet, Mrs. Niece thinks herself as much a woman and is as fond of jewels as the oldest of us all.
Your niece, is she? And that young gentleman, a brother of yours, I should presume.
Yes, my sons. They are contracted to each other. Observe their little sports. They fall in and out 10 times a day as if they were man and wife already. Why, Tony! child. What soft things are you saying to your cousin Constance this evening?
I have been saying no soft things, but that it's very hard to be followed about so. I've not a place in the house now that's left to myself but the stable.
Don't mind him, Con, my dear. He's in another story behind your back.
There's something generous in my cousin's manner. He falls out before faces to be forgiven in private.
That's a damn confounded crack.
He's a sly one. Don't you think they are like each other about the mouth, Mr. Hastings? The blinkings of mouth to a T. They're of a size, too. Back to back, my pretties. That Mr. Hastings may see you. Come, Tony.
But it could not make me, I tell you.
Oh! Lord! You've almost cracked my head! Oh, the monster! For shame, Tony. You're a man and behave so.
If I'm a man, let me have my fortune. I'll not be made a fool of no longer. George Hastings meets his lover, and Marlowe meets his match. Too soon they will discover that there may be a catch. Charles Marlowe's so damn nervous, and Katie is quite perplexed. The gentleman quite nervous, and father's very vexed. And all the while my mother refuses to concede. I'd rather any other, still that's what comes of greed. If I'm a man, let me have my fortune. I'll not be made a fool of no longer.
Is this ungrateful boy all that I am to get for the pains I have taken in your education? I that have rocked you in your cradle and fed that pretty mouth with a spoon. Did I not work that waistcoat to make you genteel? Did I not prescribe for you every day and weep while the dosage was operating?
Ecod, you had reason to weep. For you have been dosing me ever since I was born. I have gone through every dosage in The Complete Housewife 10 times over. And you've thoughts of coursing me through Quincy next spring? Ecod, I tell you, I'll not be made a fool of no longer.
Oh, wasn't it all for your good, Viper? Wasn't it all for your good?
I wish you'd let me and my good alone then. Snubbing this way when I'm in spirits. If I'm to have any good, let it come of itself. Not to keep digging it into one so.
That's false. I never see you when you're in spirits. No, Tony. You then go to the alehouse at the kennel. I'm never to be delighted by your agreeable wild notes, unfeeling monster.
Ecod, Mamma. Your own notes are the wildest of the two.
Was ever the like? But I see he wants to break my heart. I see he does.
Dear madam, permit me to lecture the young gentleman a little. I'm certain I can persuade him of his duties.
Well, I must retire. Come, Constance, my love. Do you see, Mr. Hastings, the wretchedness of my situation? Was ever a poor woman so plagued with a dear, sweet, pretty, provoking, undutiful boy?
There was a young man riding by and fain would have his way. Ring ding diddle dee. Don't mind her. Let her cry. It's the comfort of her heart. I've seen her and her sister cry over a book for an hour together. And they said they liked the book the better, the more it made them cry.
Then you're no friend of the ladies, I find, my pretty young gentleman.
That's as I find them.
Not to her of your mother's choosing, I dare answer. Yet, she appears to me a pretty, well-tempered girl.
That's because you don't know her as well as I. I know every inch about her. There's not a more bitter, cantankerous toad in all Christendom.
Pretty encouragement this for a lover.
I've seen her since the height of that. She has as many tricks as a hare in a thicket, or a colt the first day's breaking.
To me, she appears sensible and silent.
Aye, before company. And when she's with her playmate, she's as loud as a hog in a gate.
But there is a meek modesty about her that charms me.
Aye. But curb her never so little, she kicks up, you're flung in a ditch.
Well, you must allow her a little beauty. Yes, you must allow her some beauty.
Bandbox. She's all a made-up thing, man. Ah, if you could see Bet bounce through these parts, you might then talk of booty. Ecod, she has 2 eyes as black as sloes, and cheeks as broad and red as a pulpit cushion. She'd make 2 as she.
Well, what say you to a friend that would take that bitter bargain off your hands?
Anon?
Would you thank him that would take Miss Neville and leave you to happiness and your dear Betsy?
Aye. But where is there such a friend? For who would take her?
I am he. If you'll but assist me, I'll engage to whip her off to France, and you shall never hear more of her.
Assist you? Ecod, I will. To the last drop of my blood. I'll clap a pair of horses to your chaise that shall trundle you off in a twinkling, and maybe get you a part of her fortune in jewels beside that you little dream of.
My dear squire, this looks a lad of spirit.
Come along, then. You shall see more of my spirit before you're done with me. We are the boys that fear no noise as the thundering cannon roar.
Sir Charles mean by recommending his son as the modestest young man in town? To me, he appears the most impudent piece of brass that ever spoke with a tongue. He has taken possession of the easy chair by the fireside already. He took off his boots in the parlour and desired me to see them taken care of. I'm desirous to know how his impudence affects my daughter. She will certainly be shocked at it.
Well, my Kate, I see you have changed your dress as I bid you. Yet I believe there was no great occasion.
I find such a pleasure, sir, in obeying your commands, that I take care to observe them without ever debating their propriety.
And yet, Kate, I sometimes give you some cause. Particularly when I recommend my modest gentleman to you as a lover today.
You taught me to expect something extraordinary. I find the original exceeds the description.
I was never so surprised in all my life. He's quite confounded all my faculties.
I never saw anything like it. And a man of the world, too.
Ah, you'd learnt it all abroad. What a fool was I to think that a young man could learn modesty by travelling. You might as well learn wit at a masquerade.
It seems all natural to him.
A good deal assisted by bad company and a French dancing master.
I'm sure you mistake, Papa. A French dancing master could never have taught him that timid look, that awkward address, that bashful manner.
Whose look? Whose manner, child?
Mr. Marlowe's. His mauvais honte. His timidity struck me at the first sight.
Then your first sight deceived you. For I think him one of the most brazen first sights that ever astonished my senses.
Sure you rally, sir. I never saw anyone so modest.
And can you be serious? I never saw such a bouncing, swaggering puppy since I was born. Bully Dawson was but a fool to him.
Surprising. He met me with a respectful bow, a stammering voice, and a look fixed on the ground.
He met me with a loud voice, a lordly air, and a familiarity that made my blood freeze again.
He treated me with diffidence and respect. Censured the manners of the age, admired the prudence of girls that never laughed, tired me with apologies for being tiresome, then left with a bow, and, madam, I would not for the world detain you.
He spoke to me as if he knew me all his life before. Asked 20 questions and never waited for an answer. Interrupted my best remarks with some silly pun. And when I was in my best story of the Duke of Marlborough and Prince Eugene, he asked if I'd not a good hand at making punch. Yes, Kate, he asked your father if he was a maker of punch.
One of us must certainly be mistaken.
If he be what he has shown himself, I'm determined he shall never have my consent.
If he be the sullen thing I take him, he shall never have mine.
In one thing, then, we are agreed. To reject him.
Yes. But upon conditions. For if you should find him less impudent, and I more presuming, if you find him more respectful, and I more importunate, I don't know. The fellow is well enough for a man. Certainly we don't meet many such at a horse race in the country.
If we should find him so, but that's impossible. No, the first appearance has done my business. I'm seldom deceived in that.
And yet there may be many good qualities under that first appearance.
Aye, when a girl finds a fellow's outside to her taste, she then sets about guessing the rest of his furniture. With her, a smooth face stands for good sense and a genteel figure for every virtue.
I hope, sir, a conversation begun with a compliment to my good sense won't end with a sneer at my understanding.
Pardon me, Kate. But if young Mr. Brazen can find the art of reconciling contradictions, he may please us both, perhaps?
And as one of us must be mistaken, what if we go to make further discoveries?
Agreed. But depend on't. I'm in the right.
And depend on it, I'm not much in the wrong.
E-card, I have got them. Here they are, my cousin Con's necklaces, bobs and all. My mother shan't cheat the poor souls out of their fortune, me. Oh, my Janice, is that you?
My dear friend, how have you managed with your mother? I hope you have amused her with pretending love for your cousin and that you are willing to be reconciled at last. Our horses will be refreshed in a short time and we shall soon be ready to set off.
And it's something to bear your charges by the way. Your sweetheart's jewels. Keep them and hang those, I say, that would rob you of one of them.
But how have you procured them from your mother?
Ask me no questions and I'll tell you no fibs. I have procured them by the rule of thumb. If I had not a key to every drawer in Mother's bureau, how could I go to the alehouse so often as I do? An honest man may rob himself of his own at any time.
Thousands do it every day. But to be plain with you, Miss Neville is endeavouring to procure them from her aunt this very instant. If she succeeds, it will be the most delicate way, at least, of obtaining them.
Well, keep them till you know how it will be. But I know how it will be well enough. She'd as soon part with the only sound tooth in her head.
But I dread the effects of her resentment when she finds she has lost them.
Never you mind her resentment. Leave me to manage that. I don't value her resentment than the bounce of a cracker. Soons, here they are. Morris, Prance.
Indeed, Constance, you amaze me. Such a girl as you want jewels? There'll be time enough for jewels, my dear. 20 years hence, when your beauty begins to want repairs.
But what will repair beauty at 40 will certainly improve it at 20, madam.
Yours, my dear, can admit of none. That natural blushes beyond 1,000 ornaments. Besides, child, jewels are quite out at present. And don't you see half the ladies of our acquaintance? My Lady Kildaylight and Mrs. Crump and the rest of them carry their jewels to town and bring nothing but paste and marquesees back.
But who knows, madam? But somebody that shall be nameless would like me best with all my little finery about me.
Consult your glass, my dear, and then see if with those eyes you want any better sparklers. What do you think, Tony, my dear? Does your cousin Con want jewels in your eyes to set off her beauty?
That's us thereafter, maybe.
My dear aunt, if you knew how it would oblige me.
A parcel of old-fashioned rose and table-cut things. Well, they would make you look like the court of King Solomon at a puppet show. Besides, I believe I can't readily come at them. They may be missing for all I know to the contrary.
Then why don't you tell her so at once, as she's so longing for them? Tell her they're lost. It's the only way to quiet her. Say they're lost. Call me to bear witness.
You know, my dear, I'm only keeping them for you, so... So if I say they're gone, you'll bear me witness, will you?
Never fear me. Ecod, I'll say I saw them taken out with my own eyes.
I desire them but for a day, madam. Just to be permitted to show them as relics, and then they may be locked up again.
To be plain with you, my dear Constance, if I could find them, you should have them. They're missing, I assure you. Lost for all I know, but we must have patience wherever they are.
I'll not believe it. This is but a shallow pretense to deny me. I know they're too valuable to be so slightly kept, and as you are, to answer for the loss.
Don't be alarmed, Constance. If they be lost, I must restore an equivalent. But my son knows they're missing and not to be found.
That I can bear witness to. They are missing and not to be found. I'll take my oath on it.
You must learn resignation, my dear. For though we lose our fortune, yet we should not lose our patience. See me, how calm I am.
Aye. People are generally calm at the misfortunes of others.
No, I wonder. A girl of your good sense should waste a thought upon such trumpery. We shall soon find them, and in the meantime, you shall make use of my garnets till your jewels be found.
I detest garnets.
Most becoming things in the world to set off a clear complexion. You've often seen how well they look upon me. You shall have them.
I dislike them of all things. You shan't stir. Was ever anything so provoking as to mislay my own jewels and force me to wear her trumpery?
Don't be a fool. If she gives you the garnets, take what you can get. The jewels are your own already. I've stolen them from her burrow and she does not know it. Fly to your spark, he'll tell you more of the matter. Leave me to manage her.
My dear cousin.
Vanish. She's there and has missed them already. How she fidgets and spits about like a Catherine wheel.
Thieves! Robbers! We're cheated! Plundered! Open up!
What's the matter? What's the matter, Mama? Hope nothing's happened to any of the good family?
We're robbed. My burrow's been broke open, the jewels taken out, and I'm undone.
Oh, is that all? By the laws, I never saw it better acted in all my life. Ecod, I thought you was ruined in earnest.
Boy, I am ruined in earnest. My burrow has been broke open and all taken away.
Stick to that. Stick to that. I'll bear witness, you know. Call me to bear witness.
I tell you, Tony, by all that's precious, the jewels are gone and I shall be ruined forever.
Sure, I know they're gone and I'm to say so.
My dearest Tony, but hear me. They're gone, I say.
By the laws, Mama, you make me for to laugh. I know who took them well enough.
Was there ever such a blockhead that can't tell the difference between jest and earnest? I tell you, I am not in jest, Bobby.
That's right, that's right. You must be in a bit of passion, and then nobody will suspect either of us. I'll bear witness that they are gone.
Was there ever such a cross-grained brute that won't hear me? Can you bear witness that you're no better than a fool? Was ever poor woman so beset with fools on one end and thieves on another?
I can bear witness to that.
You bear witness again, you blockhead, you, and I'll turn you out of the house directly. My poor niece, what's to become of her? You do laugh, you unfeeling brute, as if you enjoyed my distress.
I can bear witness to that.
You insult me, monster. Teach you to vex your mother, I will.
I can bear witness to that.
What an unaccountable creature is that brother of mine. To send him to the house as an inn.
I don't wonder at his impudence.
But what's more, madam, the young gentleman, as you passed by in your peasant dress, asked me if you were the barmaid. He mistook you for a barmaid, madam.
Did he? Then as I live, I'm resolved to keep up the delusion. Tell me, Pimple, how do you like my present dress? Don't you think I look something like Cherry in the Beau Stratagem?
It's the dress, madam, that every lady wears in the country, but when she visits or receives company.
And you're sure he does not remember my face or person?
Certain of it.
I vow I thought so. For though we talked for some time together, yet his fears were such he'd never once looked up during the interview. Indeed, if he had, my bonnet would have kept him from seeing me.
But what do you hope from keeping him in his mistake?
In the first place, I shall be seen. And that's no small advantage to a girl who brings her face to market. Then I shall perhaps make an acquaintance. And that's no small victory gained over one who never addresses any but the wildest of her sex. But my chief aim is to take my gentleman off his guard. And like an invisible champion of romance, examine the giant's force before I offer to combat.
And you're sure you can act your part and disguise your voice so that he may mistake that as he has already mistaken your person?
Never fear me. I think I have got the true barcamp. Did you want a call?
Attend the lion there, pipes and tobacco for the angel.
The lamb has been outrageous this half hour.
It will do, madam.
Lord.
But who's here?
Hastings?
What a bawling in every part of the house. I have scarce a moment's repose. If I go to the best room, there I find my host and his story. If I fly to the gallery, there we have my hostess with her curtsy down to the ground. I have at last got a moment to myself. And now for recollection.
Did you call, sir? Did you want a call?
As for Miss Hardcastle, she's too grave and sentimental for me.
Did you want a call?
No, child. Besides, from the glimpse I had of her, I think she squints.
I'm sure, sir, I heard the bell ring.
No. I have pleased my father, however, by coming down, and I'll tomorrow please myself by returning.
Perhaps the other gentleman called, sir.
I tell you, no.
I should be glad to know, sir. We have such a parcel of servants.
No, I tell you. Yes. Child, I think I did call. I wanted... I vow, child, you are vastly handsome.
Oh, la, sir. You make one ashamed.
I never saw a more sprightly, malicious eye. Yes, my dear, I did call. Have you got any of your... what do you call it, in the house?
Oh, no, sir. We've been out with that these 10 days.
One may call in this house, I find, to very little purpose. Suppose I should call for a taste, just by way of a trial, of the nectar of your lips. Perhaps I might be disappointed in that, too.
Nectar. Nectar. That's a liquor there's no call for in these parts. French, I suppose. We keep no French wines here, sir.
Of true English growth, I assure you.
Well, then it's odd I should not know it. We brew all sorts of wines in this house, and I have lived here these 18 years.
18 years? Why, one would think, child, you kept the bar before you were born. How old are you?
Oh, sir, I must not tell my age. They say women and music should never be dated.
To guess at this distance, you can't be much above 40. Yet, nearer, I don't think so much. By coming close to some women, they look younger still. But when we come very close indeed...
Please, sir, keep your distance. One would think you wanted to know one's age as they do horses, by mark of mouth.
I protest, child, you use me extremely ill. If you keep me at this distance, how is it possible you and I can ever be acquainted?
And who wants to be acquainted with you? I want no such acquaintance, not I. I'm sure you did not treat Miss Hardcastle that was here a while ago in this obstropolous manner. I warrant me, before her you looked dashed and kept bowing to the ground and talked for all the world as if you was before a justice of the peace.
Egad, she's hit it, sure enough. In all, Of her, child? A mere awkward, squinting thing? No, I find you don't know me. I laughed and rallied her a little, but I was unwilling to be too severe. No, I could not be too severe. Curse me.
Oh, then, so you are a favourite, I find, among the ladies.
Yes, my dear, a great favourite. And yet, hang me, I can't see what they find in me to follow. At the ladies' club in town, I'm called their agreeable rattle. Rattle, child, is not my real name, but one I'm known by. My name is Solomons. Mr. Solomons, my dear, at your service.
Oh, so you were introducing me at your club? Not yourself. And you're so great a favourite there, you say?
Yes, my dear. There's Mrs. Mantrap, Lady Betty Blackleg, the Countess of Sligo, Mrs. Longhorns, old Biddy Buckskin, and your humble servant. Keep up the spirit of the place.
Oh, then it's a very merry place, I suppose.
Yes, as merry as cards, suppers, wine, and old women can make us.
And their agreeable rattle.
Gad, I don't quite like this chit. She looks knowing, methinks. You laugh, child?
I can't but laugh to think what time they all have for minding their work or their family.
All's well. She don't laugh at me. Do you ever work, child?
Aye, sure. There's not a quilt or a screen in the whole house but what can bear witness to that.
Odd so. Then you must show me your embroidery. I embroider and draw patterns myself a little. If you want to judge of your work, you must apply to me.
Aye, but the colours don't look well by candlelight. You shall see all in the morning.
And why not now, my angel? Such beauty fires beyond the power of resistance. Sure, your father here. My old luck. I never nicked 7 that I did not throw Amis ace 3 times following.
So, madam, so, I find this is your modest lover, this your humble admirer, that kept his eyes fixed on the ground and only adored at humble distance. Kate, art thou not ashamed to deceive your father so?
Never trust me, dear Papa, but he's still the modest man I first took him for. You'll be convinced of it, as well as I.
By the hand of my body, I believe his impudence is infectious. Didn't I see him seize your hand? Didn't I see him haul you about like a milkmaid? And you talk of his respect and his modesty, forsooth?
But if I shortly convince you of his modesty, that he has only faults that will pass off with time, and the virtues that will improve with age, I hope you'll forgive him.
The girl would actually make one run mad. I tell you, I'll not be convinced. I am convinced. He has scarcely been 3 hours in the house, and he has already encroached on all my prerogatives. You may like his impudence and call it modesty, but my son-in-law, madam, must have very different qualifications.
So I ask but this night to convince you.
You shall not have half the time, for I have thoughts of turning him out this very hour.
Give me that hour, then, and I hope to satisfy you.
Well, an hour let it be, then. But I'll have no trifling with your father. All fair and open. Do you mind me?
I hope, sir, that you have ever found that I considered your commands as my pride. For your kindness is such that my duty as yet had been inclination.
You surprise me. Sir Charles Marlowe expected here, this night. Where have you had your information?
You may depend upon it. I just saw his letter to Mr. Hardcastle in which he tells him he intends setting out a few hours after his son.
Then my Constance all must be completed before he arrives. He knows me, and should he find me here, would discover my name and perhaps my designs to the rest of the family.
The jewels, I hope, are safe?
Yes. Yes, I've sent them to Marlowe, who keeps the keys of our baggage. In the meantime, I'll go to prepare matters for our elopement. I've had the squire's promise of a fresh pair of horses, and if I should not see him again, will write him further directions.
Well, success attend you. In the meantime, I'll go amuse my aunt with the old pretence of a violent passion for my cousin.
I wonder what Hastings could mean by sending me so valuable a thing as a casket to keep for him, when he knows the only place I have is the seat of a post coach at an inn door. Have you deposited the casket with the landlady, as I ordered you? Have you put it into her own hands?
Yes, Your Honour.
She said she'd keep it safe, did she?
Yes, she said she'd keep it safe enough. She asked me how I came by it, and she said she had a great mind to make me give an account of myself.
They're safe, however. What an unaccountable set of beings we have got amongst. This little barmaid, though, runs in my head most strangely.
To father he is cocky, to sister he is shy. The man's a laughing stocky, we'll find out by and by. My cousin Connie's trinkets are safely with her spark. I've let my mother think it's a damned amusing lark. She thought he was pathetic, but now poor Kate has learned that Marlowe's quite athletic where barmaids are concerned.
What an unaccountable set of beings we have got amongst. This little barmaid, though, runs in my head most strangely and drives out the absurdities of all the rest of the family. She's mine. She must be mine, or I'm greatly mistaken.
Bless me, I quite forgot to tell her that I intended to prepare at the bottom of the garden. Marlowe here. And in spirits, too.
Give me joy, George. Crown me, shadow me with laurels. Well, George, after all, we modest fellows don't want for success among the women.
Some women, you mean. But what success has your honour's modesty been crowned with now that it grows so insolent upon us?
Didn't you see the tempting, brisk, lovely little thing that runs about the house with a bunch of keys to its girdle?
Well, and what then?
She's mine, you rogue, you. Such fire, such motion, such eyes, such lips. But, egad, she would not let me kiss them, though.
But are you sure, so very sure of her?
Why, man, she talked of showing me her work above stairs. And I am to improve the pattern.
But how can you, Charles, go about to rob a woman of her honour?
Pshaw. We all know the honour of the barmaid of an inn. I don't intend to rob her, take my word for it. There's nothing in this house I shan't honestly pay for.
I believe the girl has virtue.
And if she has, I should be the last man in the world that would attempt to corrupt it.
You have taken care, I hope, of the casket I sent you to lock up. It's in safety.
Yes, it's safe enough. I have taken care of it. But how could you think the seat of a postcoach at an inn door a place of safety? Ah, numbskull. I have taken better precautions for you than you did for yourself.
What?
I have sent it to the landlady to keep for you.
To the landlady?
The landlady.
You did?
I did. She's to be answerable for its forthcoming, you know.
Yes. She'll bring it forth with a witness.
Wasn't I right? I believe you'll allow that I acted prudently upon this occasion.
He must not see my uneasiness.
You seem a little disconcerted, though, methinks. Sure nothing has happened?
Nothing. Never was I in better spirits in all my life. So then, you left it with the landlady, who no doubt very readily undertook the charge.
Rather too readily. For she not only kept the casket, but through her great precaution was going to keep the messenger too.
They're safe, however.
As a guinea in a miser's purse.
So now all hopes of fortune are at an end. And we must set off without it. Well, Charles, I'll leave you to your meditations on the pretty barmaid, and may you be as successful for yourself as you have been for me.
Thank you, George. I ask no more.
I no longer know my own house. It's turned all topsy-turvy. His servants have got drunk already. I'll bear it no longer. And yet, for my respect for his father, I'll be calm. Mr. Marlowe, your servant. Your very humble servant.
Sir, your humble servant. What's to be the wonder now?
I believe, sir, you must be sensible, sir, that no man alive ought to be more welcome than your father's son, sir. I hope you think so.
I do. From my soul, sir. I don't want much entreaty. I generally make my father's son welcome wherever he goes.
I believe you do, from my soul. But though I say nothing to your conduct, that of your servants is insufferable. Their manner of drinking is setting a very bad example in this house, I assure you.
I protest, my very good sir. That's no fault of mine. If they don't drink as they ought, they are to blame. I ordered them not to spare the cellar. I did, I assure you. Here, let one of my servants come up.
My positive directions were that as I did not drink much myself, they should make up for my deficiencies below.
Then they had your orders for what they do. I'm satisfied.
They had, I assure you. You shall hear from one of themselves. You, Jeremy, come forward, sir. What were my orders? Were you not told to drink freely and call for what you thought fit for the good of the house?
I begin to lose my patience.
Please, Your Honour, liberty in Fleet Street forever. Though I'm but a servant, I'm as good as another man. I'll drink for no man before supper, sir, damn me. For good liquor will sit upon a good supper, but a good supper will not sit upon my conscience, sir.
You see, my old friend, the fellow is as drunk as he could possibly be. I don't know what you'd have more, unless you'd have the poor devil soused in a beer barrel.
Zoons, he'll drive me distracted if I contain myself any longer. Mr. Marlowe, sir, I have submitted to your insolence for more than 4 hours, and I see no likelihood of it coming to an end. I'm resolved to be master here, sir, and I desire that you and your drunken pack may leave my house directly.
Leave your house? Sure you jest, my good friend. What, when I'm doing all I can to please you?
I tell you, sir, you don't please me, so I desire you to leave my house.
Sure you cannot be serious.
At this time of night? And such a night? You only mean to banter me.
I tell you, sir, I am serious. And now that my passions are roused, I say this house is mine, sir. This house is mine, and I command you to leave it directly.
A puddle in a storm. I shan't stir a step, I assure you. This your house, fellow?
It's my house. This is my house. Mine while I choose to stay.
What right have you to bid me leave this house, sir? I never met with such impudence, curse me, never in my whole life before.
Nor I, confound me if ever I did. To come to my house, to call for what he likes, to turn me out of my own chair, to insult my family, to order his servants to get drunk, and then tell me this house is mine, sir. By all that's impudent, it makes me laugh. Ha! 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 Pray, sir, as you take the house, what think you of taking the rest of the furniture? There's a pair of silver candlesticks, and there's a fire screen, and here's a pair of brazen-nosed bellows. Perhaps you take a fancy to them.
Bring me your bill, sir. Bring me your bill, and let's make no more words about it.
Oh, and there's a set of prints, too. What think you of Rake's Progress for your own apartment?
Bring me your bill, I say, and I'll leave you in your infernal house directly.
Then there's a mahogany table that you may see your own face
My
in.
bill, I say.
Oh, I had forgot the great chair for your own particular slumbers after a hearty meal.
Zoons, bring me my bill, I say, and let's hear no more on't.
Young man, from your father's letter to me, I was taught to expect a well-bred, modest man as a visitor here. But now I find him no better than a coxcomb and a bully. But he will be here presently, and shall hear more of it.
How's this? Sure I've not mistaken the house. Everything looks like an inn. The servants cry coming, the attendance is awkward, the barmaid, too, to attend us. But she's here and will further inform me.
Whither so fast, child? A word with you.
Let it be short, then. I'm in a hurry. I believe he begins to find out his mistake, but it's too soon quite to undeceive him.
Pray, child, answer me one question. What
are you? And what may your business in this house be?
A relation of the family, sir.
What? A poor relation?
Yes, sir. A poor relation appointed to keep the keys and see that the guests want nothing in my power to give them.
That is, you act as the barmaid of this inn.
Inn? Oh, law. What brought that into your head? One of the best families in the county keep an inn. Old Mr. Hardcastle's house, an inn.
Mr. Hardcastle's house. Is this house Mr. Hardcastle's house, child?
Aye, sure. Whose else should it be?
So then, all's out. And I have been damnably imposed on. Oh, confound my stupid head! I shall be laughed at over the whole town. I shall be stuck up in caricature in all the print shops. The dullissimo macaroni. To mistake this house, of all others, for an inn, and my father's old friend for an innkeeper? What a swaggering puppy must he take me for? What a silly puppy do I find myself? There again. May I be hanged, my dear, but I mistook you for the barmaid.
Dear me. Dear me, I'm sure there's nothing in my behaviour to put me on a level with one of that stamp.
Nothing, my dear, nothing. But I was in for a list of blunders and could not help making you a subscriber. My stupidity saw everything the wrong way. I mistook your assiduity for assurance, your simplicity for allurement. But it's over. This house I no more show my face in.
I hope, sir, I've done nothing to disoblige you. I'm sure I should be sorry to affront any gentleman who's been so polite and said so many civil things to me. I'm sure I should be sorry if he left the family upon my account. I'm sure I should be sorry people said anything amiss, since I have no fortune but my character.
By heavens, she weeps. This is the first mark of tenderness I ever had from a modest woman. And it touches. Excuse me, my lovely girl. You are the only part of the family I leave with reluctance. But to be plain with you, the difference of our birth, fortune, and education makes an honourable connection impossible. And I can never harbour a thought of seducing simplicity that trusted in my honour, or bringing ruin upon one whose only fault was being too lovely.
Generous man. I now begin to admire him. But I'm sure my family is as good as Miss Hardcastle's. And though I'm poor, that's no great misfortune to a contented mind. And until this moment, I never thought it was bad to want fortune.
And why now, my pretty simplicity?
Because it puts me at a distance from one that, if I had £1,000, I would give it all to.
This simplicity bewitches me, so that if I stay, I'm undone. I must make one bold effort and leave her. Your partiality in my favour, my dear, touches me most sensibly. And were I to live for myself alone, I could easily fix my choice. But I owe too much to the opinion of the world, too much to the authority of a father, so that, I can scarcely speak it, it affects me. Farewell.
I never knew half his merit till now. He shall not go if I have power or art to detain him. I'll still preserve the character in which I stooped to conquer, but will undeceive my papa, who perhaps may laugh him out of his resolution.
Right, you may steal for yourselves the next time. I've done my duty. She's got the jewels again. That's a sure thing. But she believes it was all a mistake of the servants.
But my dear cousin, sure you won't forsake us in this distress. If she in the least suspects that I am going off, I shall certainly be locked up or sent to my Aunt Pettigrew's, which is 10 times worse.
Aye, to be sure. Aunts of all kinds are damned bad things. But what can I do? I've got you a pair of horses that will fly like Whistlejacket. And I'm sure you can't say, but I have caught you nicely before her face. Here she comes. We must court a bit or two more for fear she should suspect us.
I was greatly fluttered, to be sure. But my son tells me it was all a mistake of the servants. I shan't be easy, however, until they are fairly married. And then let her keep her own fortune. But what do I see? Fondling together as I'm alive. I never saw Tony so sprightly before. I've caught you, my pretty doves. What? Billing, exchanging stolen glances and broken murmurs, eh?
As for murmurs, Mother, we may grumble a little now and then, to be sure, but there's no love lost between us.
They're sprinkling, Tony, upon the flame, only to make it burn brighter.
Cousin Tony promises to give us more of his company at home. Indeed, he shan't leave us any more. It won't leave us, Cousin Tony, will it?
Oh, it's a pretty creature. No, I'd sooner leave my horse in a pound than leave you when you smile upon one so. Your laugh makes you so becoming.
Agreeable cousin. Who can help admiring that natural humour, that pleasant, broad, red, thoughtless? It's a bold face.
Pretty innocence.
Oh, I'm sure I've always loved Cousin Con's hazel eyes and those long, pretty fingers which she twists this way and that way as she plays the haspicals, like a parcel of bobbins.
Oh, he would charm the bird from the tree. I was never so happy before. My boy takes after his father, poor Mr. Lumpkin, exactly. The jewels, my dear Con, shall be yours incontinently. You shall have them. Isn't he a sweet boy, my dear? You shall be married tomorrow, and we'll put off the rest of his education, like Dr. Drowse's sermons, to a fitter opportunity.
Where's the squire? I've got a letter for your worship.
Give it to my mamma. She reads all my letters first.
I had orders to deliver it into your own hands.
Who does it come from?
Well, your worship man asked that of the letter itself.
Well, I could wish to know, though.
Undone, undone. A letter to him from Hastings. I know the hand. If my aunt sees it, we are ruined forever. I'll keep her employed a little if I can.
But I have not told you, madam, of my cousin's smart answer just now to Mr. Marlowe. Oh, we so laughed. Well, this way a little, for he must not hear us.
A damned cramped piece of penmanship as ever I saw in my life. I can read your print hand very well, but here there are such handles and shanks and dashes one can scarce tell the head from the tail. To Anthony Lumpkin, Esquire. Very odd. I can read the outside of my letters when my own name is well enough, but when I come to open it, it's all buzz. That's hard. Very hard. For the inside of the letter's often the cream of the correspondence.
Oh, very well, very well. So, my boy was too hard for the philosopher.
Yes, madam. But you must hear the rest, madam. A little more this way, or he may hear us. You'll hear how he puzzled him again.
He looks strangely puzzled himself, methinks.
A damned up-and-down hand, as if it was disguised in liquor. Dear Squire. Aye, that's that, but then there's an M and a T and an S. Whether the next be an Izzard or an R, confound me, I cannot tell.
What's that, my dear? Could I give you any assistance?
Oh, pray, Aunt, let me read it. Nobody reads a cramped hand better than I. Do you know who it is from?
Can't tell, except from Dick Ginger the feeder.
So it is. Dear Squire, hoping that you're in health as I am at this present, the gentleman of the Shake Bag Club has cut the gentleman of Goose Green quite out of feather. The odds, odd battle, long fighting, oh, yeah, it's all about cocks and fighting, it's of no consequence. Here, put it up.
I tell you, miss, it's of all the consequence in the world. I'd not lose the rest of it for a guinea. Here, mother, can you make this out? Of no consequence.
How's this? Dear Squire, I am now waiting for Miss Neville with a post, chaise and pair at the bottom of the garden. But I find my horses yet unable to perform the journey. I expect you'll assist us with a pair of fresh horses, as you promised. Dispatch is necessary as the hag, your mother, will otherwise suspect us. Yours, Hastings.
Patience. I shall run this tractate. My rage chokes me.
I hope, madam, you'll suspend your resentment for a few moments and not impute to me any impertinence or sinister design that may belong to another.
Fine spoken, madam. You are most miraculously polite and engaging, and quite the very pink of courtesy and circumspection, madam. And you great ill-fashioned oaf, with scarce sense enough to keep your mouth shut, well, you too joined against me. But I'll defeat all your plots in a moment. As for you, madam, since you've got a pair of fresh horses ready, it would be cruel to disappoint them. So, if you please, instead of running away with your spack, prepare this very moment to run off with me. Your old Aunt Pedigree will keep you secure. I'll warrant me. And you too, sir, may mount your horse and guard us upon the way. Here! Thomas! Roger! Diggory! I'll show you. I wish you better than you do yourselves.
So now I'm completely ruined.
Aye, that's a sure thing.
What better could be expected from being connected with such a stupid fool, and after all the knots and signs I made him?
By the laws, miss, it was your own cleverness, not my stupidity, that did your business. You were so nice and busy with your shake bags and gooseberries that I thought you could never be making believe.
So, sir, I find by a servant that you have shown my letter and betrayed us. Was this well done, young gentleman?
Here's another. Ask Miss there who betrayed you. We caught it was her doing, not mine.
Sir, I have been finely used here among you. Rendered contemptible, driven into ill manners, despised, insulted, laughed at.
Here's another. We shall have old Bedlam broke loose presently.
And there, sir, is the gentleman to whom we all owe every obligation.
What can I say to him? A mere boy. An idiot, whose ignorance and age are a protection.
A poor, contemptible booby that would but disgrace correction.
Yet with cunning and malice enough to make himself merry with all our embarrassment.
An insensible cub.
Replete with tricks and mischief.
Oh, dummy. I'll fight you both one after the other. We're baskets.
As for him, he's below resentment. But your conduct, Mr. Hastings, requires an explanation. You knew of my mistakes, yet would not undeceive me.
Tortured as I am with my own disappointments, is this a time for explanations? It is not friendly, Mr. Marlowe.
Sir!
Mr. Marlowe, we never kept on your mistake till it was too late to undeceive you. Be pacified.
My mistress desires you get ready immediately, madam. The horses have put to.
Your hat and things is in the next room. We ought to go 30 miles before morning.
Well, I'll come presently.
Was it well done, sir? To assist in rendering me ridiculous? To hang me out for the scorn of all my acquaintance? Depend upon it, sir, I shall expect an explanation.
Was it well done, sir, if you are upon that subject, to deliver what I entrusted to yourself to the care of another, sir?
Mr. Hastings, Mr. Marlowe, why will you increase my distress by this groundless dispute? I implore, I entreat
Your cloak, madam. My mistress is impatient.
I come, pray be pacified. If I leave you thus, I shall die with apprehension.
Your fan, muff, and gloves, madam. The horses are waiting.
Oh, Mr. Marlowe, if you knew what a scene of constraint and ill nature lies before me, I'm sure it would convert your resentment into pity.
I am so distracted with a variety of passions that I don't know what I do. Forgive me, madam. George, forgive me. You know my hasty temper and should not exasperate it.
The torture of my situation is my only excuse.
My dear Hastings, if you have that esteem for me that I think, that I'm sure you have, your constancy for 3 years will but increase the happiness of our future connection. If...
Miss Neville, Constance, why Constance?
I'm coming! Well, constancy. Remember, constancy is the word.
My heart. How can I support this? To be so near happiness, and such happiness.
You see now, young gentleman, the effects of your folly. What might be amusement to you is here disappointment and even distress.
Econ, I have hit it. It's here. Give me your hands. Yours. And yours, my poor sulky. My boots! Ho! Meet me 2 hours hence at the bottom of the garden. And if you don't find Tony Lumpkin a more good-natured fellow than you thought for, I'll give you leave to take my best horse and bet bouncer into the bargain. My boots! Ho!
You saw the old lady and Miss Neville drive off, you said?
Yes, Your Honour. They went off in a post-coach. Young Squire went on horseback. They're 30 miles off by this time.
And all my hopes are over.
Yes, sir. Old Sir Charles has arrived. He and the old gentleman of the house have been laughing at Mr. Marlowe's mistake this half hour. They're coming this way.
Then I must not be seen. So now to my fruitless appointment at the bottom of the garden. This is about the time.
The peremptory tone in which he sent forth his sublime commands.
And the reserve with which I suppose he treated all your advances.
And yet he might have seen something in me above a common innkeeper, too.
Yes, Dick, but he mistook you for an uncommon innkeeper.
Well, I'm in too good spirits to think of anything but joy. Yes, my dear friend, this union of our family will make our personal friendships hereditary.
The jewels that lately vanished, my mother has retrieved. For cousin Con is banished, and Marlowe much deceived. The inn was an illusion, he found out far too late. To add to his confusion, he's sweet on Sister Kate. George Hastings is dejected, and Marlowe's father here. Not quite what was expected, but resolution's near.
This union of our family will make our personal friendships hereditary. And though my daughter's fortune is but small...
Why, Dick, will you talk of fortune to me? My son is possessed of more than a competence already, and can want nothing but a good and virtuous girl to share his happiness and increase it. If they like each other, as you say they do.
If, man? I tell you, they do like each other. My daughter as good as told me so.
Yes, but girls are apt to flatter themselves, you know.
I saw him grasp her hand in the warmest manner myself. And here he comes to put you out of your ifs, I warrant him.
I come, sir, once more to ask pardon for my strange conduct. I can scarce reflect on my insolence without confusion.
Tut, boy, a trifle. You take it too gravely. An hour or two's laughing with my daughter will set all to rights again. She'll never like you the worse for it.
Sir, I shall always be proud of her approbation.
Approbation is but a cold word, Mr. Marlowe. If I'm not deceived, you have something more than approbation thereabouts. You take me?
Really, sir, I have not that happiness.
Come, come, I'm an old fellow and knows what's what as well as you that are younger. I know what has passed between you. But, Mum...
Well, sir, nothing has passed between us. But the most profound respect on my side and the most distant reserve on hers. You don't think, sir, that my impudence has been passed upon all the rest of the family?
Impudence? No, I don't say that. Not quite impudence. Though girls like to be played with and rumpled a little too sometimes. But she's told no tales, I assure you.
I never gave her the slightest cause.
Well, well, I like modesty in its place well enough, but this is overacting, young gentleman. You may be open. Your father and I will like you the better for it.
May I die, sir, if I ever...
I tell you, she don't dislike you, and as I'm sure you like her...
Dear sir, I protest,
I see no reason why you can't be joined as fast as the parson can tie you.
But hear me, sir.
Your father approves the match, I admire it. Every moment's delay will be doing a mischief, so...
But why won't you hear me? By all that's just and true, I never gave Miss Hardcastle the slightest mark of my attachment, or even the most distant hint to suspect me of affection. We had but one interview, and that was formal, modest, and uninteresting.
This fellow's formal, modest impudence is beyond bearing.
And you never grasped her hand or made any protestation?
As heaven is my witness, I came down in obedience to your commands. I saw the lady without emotion and parted without reluctance. I hope you'll exact no further proofs of my duty, nor prevent me from leaving a house in which I suffer so many mortifications.
I'm astonished at the air of sincerity with which he parted.
And I'm astonished at the deliberate intrepidity of his assurance.
I dare pledge my life and honour upon his truth.
Here comes my daughter. I'll stake my happiness upon her veracity. Kate, come hither, child. Answer us sincerely and without reserve. Has Mr. Marlowe made any professions of love and affection?
So the question is very abrupt, sir. But since you require unreserved sincerity, I think he has.
You see?
And pray, madam, have you and my son had more than one interview?
Yes, sir, several.
You see?
But did he profess any attachment?
A lasting one.
Did he talk of love?
Much, sir.
Amazing. And all this formally?
Formally.
Now, my friend, I hope you are satisfied.
But how did he behave, madam?
As most professed admirers do.
said some civil things of my face, talked much of his want of merit and the greatness of mine, mentioned his heart, gave a short tragedy speech, and ended with pretended rapture.
Now I'm perfectly convinced indeed. I know his conversation among women to be modest and submissive, and this forward-canting, ranting manner by no means describes him. And I'm confident he never sat for the picture.
Then what, sir, if I should convince you to your face of my sincerity? If you and my papa, in about half an hour, will place yourselves behind that door, you shall hear him declare his passion to me in person.
Agreed. And if I find him what you describe, all my happiness in him must have an end.
And if you don't find him what I describe, I fear my happiness must never have a beginning.
What an idiot am I, to wait here for a fellow who probably takes a delight in mortifying me. He never intended to be punctual, and I'll wait no longer. What do I see? Tis he, and perhaps with news of my Constance.
My honest squire, I now find you a man of your word. This looks like friendship.
Aye, I'm your friend, and the best friend you have in the world, if you knew but all. This riding by night by the by is cursedly tiresome. Shook me worse than the basket of a stagecoach.
But how? Where did you leave your fellow travellers? Are they in safety? Are they housed?
25 miles in 2 hours and a half is no such bad driving. The poor beasts have smoked for it. Rabbit me, I'd rather ride 40 miles after a fox than 10 with such vermin.
Well, but where have you left the ladies? I die with impatience.
Left them? Why, where should I leave them but where I found them?
This is a riddle.
Riddle me this, then. What's that? Goes round the house, and round the house, and never touches the house.
I'm still astray.
That's it, man. I've led them astray. By jingo, there's not a pond or slough within 5 miles of the place but they can tell the taste of.
I understand. You took them in a round while they supposed themselves going forward. And so you have at last brought them home again.
You shall hear. I first took them down Featherbed Lane, where we stuck fast in the mud. I then rattled them crack over the stones and up and down hill. I then introduced them to the gibbet on Heavy Tree Heath, and from that, with the circumbendibus, I fairly lodged them in the horse pond at the bottom of the garden.
But no accident, I hope?
No, no. Only Mother is confoundedly frightened. She thinks herself 40 miles off. She's sick of the journey and the cattle can scarce crawl. So, if your own horses be ready, you may whip off with cousin, and I'll be bound no soul here can budge a foot to follow you.
My dear friend, how can I be grateful?
Aye, now it's dear friend, noble squire. Just now it was all idiot cub and run me through the guts. Damn your way of fighting, I say. After we take a knock in this part of the country, we'd kiss and be friends. But if you'd run me through the guts, then I'd be dead. You might go kiss the hangman.
The rebuke is just. But I must hasten to relieve Miss Neville. If you keep the old lady employed, I promise to take care of the young one.
Never fear me. Here she comes. Vanish. She's got from the pond and dragged up to the waist like a mermaid.
Oh, Tony, I'm killed. Shook. Battered to death. I shall never survive it. That last jolt that laid us by the quickset hedge has done my business. Oh.
Alack, Mamma, it was all your own fault. You would be for running away by night without knowing 1 inch of the way.
I wish we were at home again. I never met so many accidents in so short a journey. Drenched in the mud, overturned in a ditch, stuck fast in a slough, jolted to a jelly, and at last to lose our way. Whereabouts do you think we are, Tony?
By my guess, we should be upon Crackskull Common. About 40 miles from home.
Oh, Lord. The most notorious spot in all the country. We only need a robbery to make a complete night hunt.
Don't be afraid, Mamma, don't be afraid. 2 of the 5 that kept here are hanged, and the other 3 may not find them.
Oh,
don't be afraid. Is that a man that's galloping behind? No, it's only a tree. Don't be afraid.
The fright will certainly kill me.
Do you see anything like a black hat moving behind the thicket?
Oh, death!
No, it's only a cow. Don't be afraid, Mamma. Don't be afraid.
I'm alive, Tony. I see a man coming towards us. I am sure on't. If he perceives us, we're undone.
Father-in-law, by all that's unlucky, come to take one of his night walks. It's a highwayman with pistols as long as my arms. A damn ill-looking fellow.
Good heaven defend us, he approaches.
You hide yourself in that thicket. Leave me to manage him. If there be any danger, I'll cough and cry out. When I cough, be sure to keep close.
I'm mistaken, or I heard voices of people in want of help. Oh, Tony, is that you? I did not expect you so soon back. Are your mother and a charge in safety?
Very safe, sir. My Aunt Pedigree's.
I find there's danger.
40 miles in 3 hours? Sure, that's too much, my youngster.
Stout horses and willing minds make short journeys, as they say.
Sure, he'll do the dear boy no harm.
But I heard a voice here. I shall be glad to know from whence it came.
It was I, sir. I was talking to myself, sir. I was saying 40 miles in 4 hours was very good going. As to be sure it was. I've got a sort of cold by being out in the air. We'll go in, if you please.
But if you talked to yourself, you did not answer yourself. I'm certain I heard 2 voices, and am resolved to find the other out.
He's going to find me out.
What need you go if I tell you, sir? I'll lay down my life for the truth. I'll tell you all.
I'll not be detained. I insist on seeing. It's in vain to expect I'll believe you.
Oh, Lord, he'll murder my poor boy, my darling. Here, good gentleman, whet your rage upon me. Take my money, my life, but spare that young gentleman. Spare my child if you have any mercy.
My wife, as I'm a Christian. But from whence does she come, or what does she mean?
Take compassion on us, good Mr. Highwayman. Take our money, our watches, all we have, but spare our lives. We will never bring you to justice. Indeed, we won't, good Mr. Highwayman.
I believe the woman's out of her senses. What? Dorothy! Don't you know me?
Mr. Hardcastle, I'm alive. But my fears blinded me. But who, my dear, would have expected to meet you here in this frightful place, so far from home? What's brought you to follow us?
Sure, Dorothy, you've not lost your wits. So far from home when you are within 40 yards of your own front door.
What?
This is one of your old tricks, you graceless rogue, you. Don't you know the gate? And the mulberry tree? Don't you remember the horse pond, my dear?
Yes. I shall remember the horse pond as long as I live. I've caught my death in it. And it's to you, you graceless harlot, that I owe all this? I'll teach you to abuse your mother, I will.
All the parish says you have spoilt me, and so you may take the fruits on.
I'll Boy, you I will. Try it. Come back.
There's morality, however, in his reply.
My dear Constance, why will you deliberate thus? If we delay a moment, all is lost forever. Pluck up a little resolution and we shall soon be out of reach of her malignity.
I find it impossible. My spirits are so sunk with the agitations I have suffered that I am unable to face any new danger. 2 or 3 years' patience will at last crown us with happiness.
Such a tedious delay is worse than inconstancy. Let us fly, my charmer. Let us date our happiness from this very moment. Perish fortune. Love and content will increase what we possess beyond a monarch's revenue. Let me prevail.
No. Mr. Hastings, no. Prudence once more comes to my relief, and I will obey its dictates. In the moment of passion, fortune may be despised, but it ever produces a lasting repentance. I'm resolved to apply to Mr. Hardcastle's compassion and justice for redress.
But though he had the will, he has not the power to relieve you.
But he has influence, and upon that I am resolved to rely.
I have no hopes. But since you persist, I must reluctantly obey you.
What a situation am I in? If what you say appears, I shall then find a guilty son. If what he says be true, I shall lose one that of all others I most wish for a daughter.
I'm proud of your approbation, sir. And to show I merit it, if you place yourselves as I directed, you shall hear his explicit declaration. But he comes.
I'll to your father and keep him to the appointment.
Though prepared for setting out, I come once more to take leave. Nor did I, till this moment, know the pain I feel in the separation.
I believe these sufferings cannot be very great, sir, which you can so easily remove. A day or two longer, perhaps, might lessen your uneasiness by showing the little value of what you think proper to regret.
This girl every moment improves upon me. It must not be, madam. I've already trifled too long with my heart. My very pride begins to submit to my passion. The disparity of education and fortune, the anger of a parent, and the contempt of my equals begin to lose their weight. And nothing can restore me to myself but this painful effort of resolution.
Then go, sir. I'll urge nothing more to detain you. Though my family be as good as hers, you came down to visit, and my education, I hope not, inferior. What are these advantages without equal affluence? I must remain contented with the slight approbation of imputed merit. I must have only the mockery of your addresses, while your serious aims are fixed on fortune.
Here. Behind this door.
Aye. Make no noise. I'll engage my Kate covers him with confusion at last.
By heavens, madam, fortune was ever my smallest consideration. Your beauty, at first, caught my eye. For who could see that without emotion? But every moment I converse with you steals in some new grace, heightens the picture and gives it stronger expression. What at first seemed rustic plainness now appears refined simplicity. What seemed forward assurance now strikes me as the result of courageous innocence and conscious virtue.
What can it mean? He amazes me.
I told you how it would be. Hush.
I'm now determined to stay, madam. And I have too good an opinion of my father's discernment, when he sees you, to doubt his approbation.
No, Mr. Marlowe, I will not, cannot detain you. Do you think I could ever suffer a connection in which there is the smallest room for repentance? Do you think I would take the mean advantage of a transient passion to load you with confusion? Do you think I could ever relish that happiness which was acquired by lessening yours?
By all that's good, I can have no happiness but what's in your power to grant me. Nor shall I ever feel repentance, but in not having seen your merits before, I will stay, even contrary to your wishes. And though you should persist to shun me, I will make my respectful assiduities atone for the levity of my past conduct.
Sir, I must entreat you'll desist. As our acquaintance began, so let it end. In indifference. I might have given an hour or two to levity, but seriously, Mr. Marlowe, do you think I could ever submit to a connection where I must appear mercenary and you imprudent? Do you think I could ever catch at the confident addresses of a secure admirer?
Does this look like security? Does this look like confidence? No, madam. Every moment that shows me your merit only serves to increase my diffidence and confusion. Here, let me continue.
I can hold it no longer. Charles! Charles! Why hast thou deceived me? Is this your indifference, your uninteresting conversation?
Your cold contempt, your formal interview. What have you to say now?
That I'm all amazement? What can it mean?
It means you can say and unsay things at pleasure. That you can address a lady in private and deny it in public. That you have one story for us and another for my daughter.
Daughter? This lady, your daughter?
Yes, sir, my only daughter, my Kate. Whose else should she be?
Oh, the devil.
Yes, sir. That very identical, tall, squinting lady you were pleased to take me for. She that you addressed as the mild, modest, sentimental man of gravity and the bold, forward, agreeable rattle of the ladies' club.
Zoons, there's no bearing this. It's worse than death.
In which of your characters, sir, will you give us leave to address you? As the faltering gentleman with looks on the ground that speaks just to be heard and hates hypocrisy? Or the loud, confident creature that keeps it up with Mrs. Mantrap and old Miss Biddy Buckskin till 3 in the morning?
Oh, curse my noisy head. I never attempted to be impudent yet that I was not taken down. I must be gone.
By the hand of my body, and you shall not. I see it was all a mistake, and am rejoiced to find it so. You shall not, sir, I tell you. I know she'll forgive you. Won't you forgive him, Kate? We'll all forgive you. Take courage, man.
So, they've gone off. And go, I care not.
Who gone?
My dutiful niece and her gentleman, Mr. Hastings, from town. He that came down with our modest visitor here.
Who? My honest George Hastings, as worthy a fellow as lives, and the girl could not have made a more prudent choice.
Then, by the hand of my body, I'm proud of the connection.
Well, if he's taken away the lady, he's not taken her fortune. That remains in this family to console us for her loss.
Sure, Dorothy, you would not be so mercenary.
That's my affair, not yours.
But you know, if your son, when of age, refuses to marry his cousin, her whole fortune is then at her own disposal.
Aye, but he is not of age, and she has not thought proper to refuse him. What? Returned so soon? I begin not to like it.
For my late attempts to fly off with your niece, let my present confusion be my punishment. But we are now come back to appeal from your justice to your humanity. By her father's consent, I first paid her my addresses, and our passions were first founded in duty.
Since his death, I have been obliged to stoop to dissimulation to avoid oppression. In an hour of levity, I was ready even to give up my fortune to secure my choice. But I'm now recovered from the delusion and hope from your tenderness what is denied me from a nearer connection.
This is but the waning end of a modern novel.
Be it what it will, I'm glad they come back to reclaim their due. Come hither, Tony boy. Do you refuse this lady's hand, whom I now offer you?
What signifies my refusing? You know I can't refuse her till I'm of age, Father.
Whilst I thought concealing your age, boy, was likely to conduce to your improvement, I concurred with your mother's desire to keep it secret. But since I find she turns it to a wrong use, I must now declare that you've been of age these 3 months.
Of age? Am I of age, Father?
Above 3 months.
Then you'll see the first use I make of my liberty. Witness all men, by these presents, that I, Anthony Lumpkin, Esquire, of Wiverton Place, refuse you, Constantia Neville, spinster, of no place at all, for my true and lawful wife. So Constance Neville may marry whom she pleases, and Tony Lumpkin is his own man again.
Oh, brave squire.
My worthy friend.
Undutiful offspring.
Joy, my dear George. I give you joy sincerely. And could I prevail upon my little tyrant here to be less arbitrary, I should be the happiest man alive if you would return me the favour.
Come, madam. You are now driven to the last scene of all your contrivances. I know you like him. I'm sure he loves you. And you must and shall have him.
And I say so too. And Mr. Marlowe, if she makes you as good a wife as she has a daughter, I don't think you'll ever repent your bargain. And so now to supper. Tomorrow we shall gather all the poor of the parish about us, and the mistakes of the night shall be crowned with a merry morning. So, boy, take her. And as you have been mistaken in the mistress, my wish is you may never be mistaken in the wife.
In grandfather's time, in days gone by, there lived an old fox who was cunning and sly. He robbed all the hen roosts, he laughed at the cocks, he laughed at the beadle, the cage and the stocks. He laughed at the squire and he laughed at the hounds, and leapt every gate at the parson's grounds. Such a cunning old rogue was this sly old fox.
So, these two men are on their way to have dinner at the painter Sir Joshua Reynolds' London house, sometime in the 1760s. And they come across Oliver Goldsmith, standing across the street from a crowd which has gathered to gawp at some girls who are displaying themselves in an upper window. Foreign girls, we're told, because English 18th century girls would never be so immodest. And Oliver Goldsmith is shouting at the crowd.
You stupid beasts! Gaping at painted Jezebels when a man of my talents passes by, unnoticed.
When he turned up at dinner, one of the two men who'd seen this repeated what Goldsmith had shouted and asked him why he'd been so rude, but Goldsmith was absolutely adamant. I may have thought it, but I never uttered it. This story tells us so much about Goldsmith. He always had to be the centre of attention, however ridiculous it made him look. He always said exactly what was in his head, even though that got him into a lot of hot water. But he also had a deadpan way of making a joke, which was often misunderstood and taken at face value in that age of reason where the literal was king and the lateral was Irish. James Boswell tells that story as though Goldsmith really didn't know he'd shouted at the crowd. But even Goldsmith wouldn't actually have believed that his friend could read his mind verbatim. Some of the wittiest plays in the English language were written by Irishmen. Congreve, Sheridan, Wilde, Shaw. But another, probably much bigger audience laughs at the quintessential Irish joke, in which Irish logic is depicted in a, shall we say, eccentric light. And in a sense, Oliver Goldsmith was that Irish joke. There's a story of him going with Dr. Johnson to see some famously lifelike Italian puppets. And in the tavern afterwards, Johnson is enthusing about how the little fellow brandished his spontoon. "Ah, there's nothing in it," said Goldsmith. "Give me a spontoon, I can do it as well myself." Well, it seems so obvious that Goldsmith was making a joke. Of course he could do it as well as a puppet. But so prevailing was the view that anything anybody could do, Goldsmith felt he could do better. Sir Joshua Reynolds, the great painter, wrote, "It must be confessed that whoever excelled in any art or science, however different from his own, was sure to be considered by him as a rival." The great actor-manager David Garrick's view was that Goldsmith would never allow a superior in any art, from writing poetry down to dancing a hornpipe. That this rivalry with puppets was reported po-faced by at least 3 contemporary sources as an example of Goldsmith's competitive nature. Misunderstood, ridiculed, even by his friends, Goldsmith went with the flow, set himself up as a buffoon if that was what it would take to be accepted, allowed himself to be the whipping boy of the literary establishment. The critics were frequently damning, and She Stoops to Conquer got its fair share of brickbats. But if they're huffing and puffing about the play's immorality or its offences against the rules laid down by the Greeks and Romans seem irrelevant to us now, they did also point out that it is clumsily constructed and contrived and inconsistent. And to this day, critics remind us that it's neither witty nor profound, and that it shamelessly plagiarised plots and dramatic devices from numerous other plays. It's interesting that it remains one of the most popular plays in the English language. Well, Goldsmith had strong and surprisingly modern views on the theatre and acting. He'd gloomily predicted that we will have no good plays now. The taste of the audience has been spoiled by the pantomime of Shakespeare. Nay, but you will allow that Shakespeare has great merit. No, I know Shakespeare very well. So, even if he was quite happy to plagiarise from more recent successes for She Stoops to Conquer, and his debt to Farquhar's The Beau Stratagem was so blatant, even he felt the need to acknowledge it.
Tell me, Pimple, how do you like my present dress? Don't you think I look something like Cherry in The Beau Stratagem?
He certainly wasn't going to let Shakespeare and the classics cow him. His debt to his friend Isaac Bickerstaff's opera, Love in a Village, was even greater, but since that in turn had been lifted straight out of Marivaux and Wycherley, perhaps Goldsmith didn't feel the need to acknowledge the debt. Besides, Bickerstaff's taste for guardsmen had meant he'd had to flee the country in a hurry and for good, so he wasn't around to object. Goldsmith's main aim with She Stoops to Conquer, apart from trying yet another medium in an attempt to make some money out of his writing, was to explode current theatrical fashion. Restoration comedy had glittered with wit and naughtiness after Cromwell's protectorate had forbidden theatre altogether. But by the mid-18th century, the tables had turned in favour of a much blander type of sentimental comedy, as it came to be known, in which everyone was nice. And, as Sheridan was to point out, there is no possibility of being witty without a little ill nature. These sentimental comedies grew out of a sort of dreary political correctness, which no longer allowed the fabulous, larger-than-life characters we find in Congreve and Vanbrugh. Such characters no longer exist, wrote one smug-faced critic. And some of our writers have very judiciously chosen what is called sentimental comedy as better suited to the principles and manners of our age.
Well, Goldsmith was having none of it. They laughed at his broad accent and he'd survived. Now he'd make them laugh on the other side of their faces at his broad comedy.
Market? Well, we must not snub the poor boy now, for I believe we shan't have him long among us. Anybody that looks in his face may see he's consumptive.
Oh, if growing too fat be one of the symptoms.
He coughs sometimes.
Yes, when his liquor goes the wrong way.
I'm actually afraid of his lungs.
And truly so am I, for he sometimes whoops like a speaking trumpet. Oh, here he comes. A very consumptive figure, truly.
Why, Tony! Where you going, my charmer? Won't you give Papa and I a little of your company, lovey?
I'm in haste, Mother. I cannot stay.
You shan't venture out this raw afternoon, my dear. You look most shockingly.
I can't stay, I tell you.
It will be allowed, Goldsmith had written, that sentimental pieces do often amuse us. But the question is whether the true comedy would not amuse us more.
Pray, my dear, disappoint them for one night at least.
As for disappointing them, I should not much mind. But I can't abide to disappoint myself.
Well, you shan't go.
I will, I tell you.
Say you shan't.
We'll see which is the strongest. You or I.
Oh, no! Oh, Bobby! Don't you...
Aye, there goes a pair that only spoil each other.
And preparing an audience now used to a diet of sentimental comedy for the laughing comedy he's about to give them, Goldsmith warns,
Humour, at present, seems to be departing from the stage, and the audience sit at the play as gloomy as at the tabernacle. Too much refinement will banish humour and character from ours, as it has already done from the French theatre. It is not easy to recover an art when once lost, and it would be just punishment that when, by being too fastidious, we have banished humour from the stage, we should ourselves be deprived of the art of laughing.
She Stoops to Conquer is not witty in the Restoration sense because it focuses on a more boisterous, less artificial humour that invites real robustness in the playing. Long before he'd even written a play, Goldsmith noticed that too often we see our fine gentlemen do nothing throughout a whole part but strut and open their snuff-box. And he points out that though it would be inexcusable in a comedian to add anything of his own to the poet's dialogue, yet as to action he is entirely at liberty. By this he may show the fertility of his genius, the poignancy of his humour, and the exactness of his judgment.
We scarce see a fool or a coxcomb in common life who is not some peculiar oddity in his action. These actions it is not in the power of words to represent and depend solely upon the actor. He'd noticed on his travels that the inhabitants of the continent are less reserved than here. The English use very little gesture in ordinary conversation, he wrote, and so there is something in the deportment of all our players infinitely more stiff and formal than among the actors of other nations. Goldsmith is an actor's writer in that he relies on inventive, energetic playing to bring his characters to life. He relished the detailed performance of Ned Shooter, who was later to create the role of Mr. Hardcastle for him, and also played the equivalent role in Love in a Village.
in Fielding's adaptation of Molière's The Miser at Covent Garden. In the midst of one of his most violent passions, while he appears in an ungovernable rage, feels the demon of avarice still upon him, stoops to pick up a pin, which he quilts into the flap of his coat pocket with great assiduity. 2 candles are lighted up for his wedding. He flies and turns one of them in the socket. It is, however, lighted up again. He then steals to it and privately crams it into his pocket. But the Evening Post's review of the production complains that Mr. Shooter very frequently, and indeed very needlessly, takes too great freedom, too much latitude in the representation, especially if he finds any opportunity for descending into the veil of grimace or buffoonery. So we see what Goldsmith was up against in his crusade to broaden comedy and let actors take inventive liberties. But he clearly liked downright slapstick too, because he goes to another Fielding Molière adaptation at Drury Lane, The Mock Doctor, and is beside himself with glee when Mr. Yeats sits in a chair with an high back and then begins to show away by talking nonsense, which he would have believed Latin by those whom he knows do not understand a syllable of the matter. At last, he grows enthusiastic, enjoys the admiration of the company, tosses his legs and arms about, and in the midst of his raptures and vociferations, he and the chair fall back together. All this appears dull enough in the recital, but the gravity of Cato himself could not stand it in the representation. If this was the sort of thing he had in mind for Tony Lumpkin, he was clearly going to offend the critics, but long ago he'd written, "To this happy few who have the leisure to polish what they write and the liberty to choose their own subjects, I would direct this advice, which consists in a few words. Write what you think, regardless of the critics." Goldsmith trained as a doctor, called himself a poet, but mostly he was a journalist, so he was used to drawing on his own experiences, and it's no surprise then that his fictional work is quite closely autobiographical. She Stoops opens in the well-worn territory of town versus country, but what the play is actually about is our inability to see who people really are. Tony Lumpkin drives the play, and the plot depends on his seeming to be a country bumpkin and not recognisable as the squire that he is. Goldsmith, the Irish boy from the country who never had a penny to his name, was painfully aware that the image he projected was inaccurate and not what he'd wish. He never forgot the incident of a pupil at the school where he taught briefly as a young man, saying to him, "But surely you don't consider yourself a gentleman?" When Dr. Johnson was dressing to meet Goldsmith for the first time, a friend came to collect him and commented on how well-dressed Johnson was. "Why, sir," replied Dr. Johnson, "I hear that Goldsmith, who is a very great sloven, justifies his disregard of cleanliness and decency by quoting my practice, and I am desirous this night to show him a better example." But the roots of Tony Lumpkin go back further in Goldsmith's life. He was brought up in a chaotic country rectory in deepest rural Ireland, not unlike that in his novel, The Vicar of Wakefield. And his sister Catherine tells a story of the 7-year-old Oliver being asked to pass the kettle at a tea party. The handle was hot, so he lifted up his skirt to hold it with. And the parish ladies present, Catherine tells us, perceived something which made them laugh immoderately. Whether from the awkwardness of the turn or anything that might be seen there, I can't say, but Oliver immediately perceived the cause of their laughter. He told his father, who gave him the valuable advice that art can triumph over embarrassment, if not adversity, and offered him the reward of a piece of gingerbread if he could write a poem about what had happened. Well, this is what the 7-year-old Oliver Goldsmith came up with. "Theseus did see, as poets say, dark hell and its abysses, but had not half so sharp an eye as our young charming misses, for they could through boys' breeches peep, and view whate'er he had there. It seemed to blush, and they all laughed, because the face was all bare. They laughed at that which sometimes else might give them greatest pleasure. How quickly they could see the thing which was their darling treasure." Well, I hope he got his piece of gingerbread. Tony Lumpkin, for all that he's an awkward booby, also has a poetic bent. And the song that he writes in the play, interestingly, dismisses two of the professions which Oliver was encouraged to pursue. And he concludes with Goldsmith that being merry and clever are the stuff of life.
Silence for a song!
Oh, a song!
He's going to knock himself down for a song.
Go on, song!
Then I'll sing you gentlemen a song I made upon this alehouse, The Three Pigeons.
Hooray!
Let schoolmasters puzzle their brain with grammar and nonsense and learning. Good liquor, I stoutly maintain, gives Janus a better discerning. Let them cry of their heathenish gods, their lees and their sticks and their stygians, their queens and their quays and their quads. They're all but a parcel of pigeons. Hey!
Though, like Goldsmith, he may seem to be a lout, he has a healthy repertoire of classical references.
When Methodist preachers come down, are preaching that drinking is sinful. I'll wager the rascals a crown. They'll always preach best with a skinful. But when you come down with your pence for a slice of their scurvy religion, I'll leave it to all men of sense. But you, my good friend, are the pigeon.
And he's shrewd enough to realise the hypocrisy of religion. Goldsmith, when asked which was the best biblical commentary, replied, common sense.
And let us be merry and clever.
Every species of flattery should be carefully avoided, wrote the adult Goldsmith, perhaps regretting the indulgence of his parents. A boy who happens to say a sprightly thing is generally applauded so much that he continues a coxcomb all his life after. He's reputed a wit at 14 and becomes a blockhead at 20. The mother herself should stifle her pleasure or her vanity when little master happens to say a good or a smart thing. Well, Mrs. Hardcastle clearly hadn't read the article, and Tony, reared up and spoiled at his mother's apron string, is allowed to become a blockhead.
Mum.
Bless your heart for a sweet, pleasant, damn mischievous son of a whore.
But back in real life, young Oliver caught smallpox, which disfigured him quite severely, and this knocked back his confidence. He cut a really ugly figure, his sister said. And there's a painful scene in The Vicar of Wakefield when the vicar's bright young son, Moses, at dinner tries to engage the squire in intelligent debate, and the squire cruelly and unfairly humiliates him. It's an odd little scene in which the reader feels genuinely let down that the debate fizzles out. Goldsmith was perhaps trying to emulate Sterne's Tristram Shandy, which was currently dazzling and confusing the literary world. But the adults ganging up on a well-meaning child is written with real pain and compassion, which suggests it was drawn from experience. At school, Oliver is described as being a short, thick, pale-faced, pock-marked boy who was awkward in manner, backward and diffident. But he learned to conceal his insecurity with bluster, and when a tactless relative said to him, "Why, Noll, you're become a fright. When do you mean to get handsome again?" he replied tartly, "I mean to get better, sir, when you do." He got into the habit of being defensive and couldn't shake it off, even though he was well aware how unattractive it could be. Years later, he wrote, "There's not perhaps a more whimsically dismal figure in nature than a man of real modesty who assumes an air of impudence, who, while his heart beats with anxiety, studies ease and affects good humour." So though Goldsmith, like Tony Lumpkin, is the gentleman who looks like a bumpkin, equally he is Marlowe.
An impudent fellow may counterfeit modesty, but I'll be hanged if a modest man can ever counterfeit impudence.
Let's see your list of the larder, then. I ask it as a favour. I always match my appetite to my bill of fare.
Sir, he's very right, and it's my way, too.
Goldsmith was quite at home with those who might have been considered his inferiors, but felt the need to be insufferably arrogant to those whom he wanted to accept him as an equal. Marlowe is socially inept with his equals and insufferably arrogant to those whom he considers his inferiors. His bashfulness with Kate renders him literally incapable of playing sentimental comedy.
Miss Hardcastle, Mr. Marlowe, I am proud of bringing two persons of such merit together,
that only want to know, to esteem each other.
Market!
His rudeness to Hardcastle, wrongly believing him to be an overfamiliar landlord, is sustained over a perilously long scene.
This your house, fellow? It's my house. This is my house. Mine while I choose to stay. What right have you to bid me leave this house, sir? I never met with such impudence, curse me, never in my whole life before.
Nor I, confound me if ever I did.
But Goldsmith had plenty of material to draw on.
His sister tells us that while still at school, Goldsmith was given a guinea and characteristically wanted to spend it in style rather than save it. So he rode into our dar and asked a passerby to direct him to the best house in the place, meaning the best inn. Well, the passerby, whose name was Cornelius Kelly, if you want corroborative detail, either took him literally or had a sense of humour and directed him to the best house, Mr. Featherstone's, not the inn. Well, Oliver, with all the confidence of a schoolboy with a guinea to spend, grandly ordered dinner, generously allowed what he took to be the landlord and his daughters to dine with him, went up to bed, ordering breakfast in bed in the morning, and it was only when he came to ask for the bill that he realised his mistake. With the memory of that excruciating embarrassment and the knowledge that fact is at least as improbable as fiction, Goldsmith reinvents himself as Marlowe, and to punish himself, makes the character deeply unattractive.
What has your philosophy got in the house for supper?
For supper, sir? Was ever such a request made to a man in his own house?
Yes, sir. Supper, sir. I begin to feel an appetite. I shall make devilish work tonight in the larder, I promise you.
Such a brazen dog sure never my eyes beheld. Well, really, sir, as for supper, I can't well tell. My Dorothy and the cookmaid settled these things between them. I leave these kind of things entirely to them.
You do you?
Entirely. By the by, I believe they are in actual consultation upon what's for supper this very moment in the kitchen.
Those pods, don't you? Where's the plate? Come on, come on.
Then I beg they'll admit me as one of their privy council. It's a way I have got. When I travel, I always choose to regulate my own supper. Let the cook be called. No offence, I hope, sir.
Oh, no, sir. None in the least.
However sexy the actor playing Marlowe is, the character remains deeply, if comically, unattractive, until, to his confusion, he realises he is actually in love with what he thought was the barmaid he's been flirting with. Well, almost raping, actually.
By all that's good, I can have no happiness but what's in your power to grant me. Nor shall I ever feel repentance, but in not having seen your merits before, I will stay, even contrary to your wishes. And though you should persist to shun me, I will make my respectful assiduities atone for the levity of my past conduct.
Goldsmith has been accused of reverting to sentimental comedy here, but in the context of Marlowe's character and the robustness of the play, this is a moment of absolute and disarming honesty.
Does this look like security? Does this look like confidence? No, madam. Every moment that shows me your merit only serves to increase my diffidence and confusion.
This moment of vulnerability is Marlowe's saving grace, and Goldsmith's too. Goldsmith had a directness, an honesty and integrity that make up for all his bluster, and which counteract acres of dodgy dramaturgy. We forgive Marlowe everything.
Since Goldsmith seems to have been at his best when writing from his own experience, his women are on the whole less well written than the men. On paper, Kate can seem rather unlikable and little more than a means of manipulating the plot, and Goldsmith relies on his actress to bring her to life. Perhaps determined not to be in a sentimental comedy, Kate is ultimately unmoved by Marlowe's capitulation, which she has contrived, and laughs at his vulnerability.
In which of your characters, sir, will you give us leave to address you? As the faltering gentleman with looks on the ground that speaks just to be heard and hates hypocrisy? Or the loud, confident creature that keeps it up with Mrs. Mantrap and old Miss Biddy Buckskin till 3 in the morning?
Oh, curse my noisy head.
And Hastings significantly defines the difference in their feelings.
I know you like him. I'm sure he loves you. And you must and shall have him.
Well, this is a laughing comedy after all, and mustn't have a sentimental ending, though the rest of the denouement pretty much ensures that.
But it may also reflect Goldsmith's experience of women. Painfully aware that he was unattractive, Mrs. Chumley once toasted, "Dr. Goldsmith, the ugliest man I know." He never married. There's no evidence of any romantic entanglements, only a couple of vague rumours, which may have left him feeling rejected. He certainly preferred the male company of Dr. Johnson's literary club. So that when he finally made enough money from his first attempt at ousting sentimental comedy, The Good-Natured Man, to allow him realistically to afford to get married, he decided instead to move up market from his lodgings. Years previously, he'd borrowed some money to have a suit made for an interview for a job, but had had to pawn that suit immediately to pay some debts. On his way to his creditor, he met a woman, total stranger, whose husband had just been arrested for debt. Well, characteristically, he gave her all the money he'd just raised from the pawnbroker. Then, so that she could afford to pay the rent, he went to lodge with this Mrs. Martin at the rather squalid Green Arbor Court, Little Old Bailey. And though he'd graduated to marginally better rooms in Wine Office Court off Fleet Street, he now moved to bachelor quarters at a much smarter address, here at Brick Court, Temple. It was a short walk from here to meetings at Dr. Johnson's literary club, and he took a cottage in the country as well with his neighbour here, Edward Bott. The actual house where he lived, number 2 Brick Court, was destroyed in the war. While he still had money, he gave lots of parties here, with all-embracing guest lists. He particularly enjoyed entertaining children. George Coleman's young son pointed out that Garrick played with children to amuse himself, but Goldsmith played with children to amuse them. And apparently he always made sure there was enough food to give to the needy women of the neighbourhood, and regularly sent food parcels back to his old landlady at Green Arbor Court. Understandably nervous of young marriageable women like Kate, he had great compassion for older and needier women. He paints a ludicrous woman in Mrs. Hardcastle.
Pursuing humour will sometimes lead us into the recesses of the mean.
Was there ever such a cross-grained brute that won't hear me? Can you bear witness that you're no better than a fool? Was ever poor woman so beset with fools on one hand and thieves on another? Will you laugh, you unfeeling brute? Was ever cross-grained?
And though it's not a great role in the Lady Wishfort mould, he momentarily has her reveal real love and vulnerability, as he does with Marlowe. And Goldsmith dares to do this at the comic climax of the play.
Action!
Set upon, she thinks, by highwaymen, Mrs. Hardcastle's first instinct is to save her appalling son.
Oh, Lord, you murder my poor boy, my darling. Here, good gentleman, whet your rage upon me. Take my money, my life, but spare that young gentleman, spare my child if you have any mercy.
My wife, as I'm a Christian.
Blind to her appalling son's faults, as mothers tend to be blind to their sons' faults, we know that the supposed highwayman is her husband, and that she's not 40 miles away from home, but in her own back garden. And with any luck, we're laughing. But we also can't fail to be moved by this brave, selfless declaration of love, born this time possibly out of Goldsmith's own acknowledgement of his mother's sacrifices for his education, which, like Tony, he continually put off. But once installed in Brick Court, he decided to go back to practicing the medicine he'd so imperfectly studied, but prescribed poison by mistake to his first patient, and thought better of it.
Whenever you undertake to kill, let it be only your enemies.
Critics have dismissed She Stoops to Conquer as a farce, as though that pinnacle of technical achievement were something to be dismissed. But then comedy of every kind has always been seen as the easy option. One's reminded of the English Hollywood actor Edmund Gwenn, apparently saying on his deathbed, "Oh, dying's easy. Now comedy, that's difficult."
But actually, She Stoops to Conquer isn't a farce, it's a comedy of errors. And the only sustained farcical sequence, the subplot about Constance's jewels, which is tied into the main plot in that it relies on Marlowe still believing that Mrs. Hardcastle is the landlady, is brilliantly handled.
Would you thank him that would take Miss Neville and leave you to happiness and your dear Betsy?
Aye. But where is there such a friend? For who would take her?
I am he.
I have often told you that though ready to obey you, I yet should leave my little fortune behind with reluctance.
If you'll but assist me, I'll engage to whip her off to France and you shall never hear more of her.
Assist you? Ecod, I will. To the last drop of my blood. Ecod, I have got. Here they are, my cousin Con's necklaces, bobs and all. My mother shan't cheat the poor souls out of their fortune, me.
The instant they are put into my possession, you shall find me ready to make them, and myself, yours.
Your sweetheart's jewels. Keep them, and hang those, I say, that would rob you of one of them.
But how have you procured them from your mother?
Ask me no questions, and I'll tell you no fibs.
Indeed, Constance, you amaze me. Such a girl as you want jewels? There'll be time enough for jewels, my dear. 20 years hence, when your beauty begins to want repairs.
Tell her they're lost. It's the only way to quiet her. Say they're lost. Call me to bear witness.
You know, my dear, I'm only keeping them for you, so if I say they're gone, you'll bear me witness, will you?
Never fear me.
We're robbed. My burrow's been broke open. The jewels taken out, and I'm undone.
Oh, is that all? By the laws, I never saw it better acted in all my life. Ecod, I thought you was ruined in earnest.
Hey, boy, I am ruined in earnest. My burrow has been broke open and all taken away.
Stick to that. Stick to that. I'll bear witness, you know. Call me to bear witness.
I tell you, Tony, by all that's precious, the jewels are gone and I shall be ruined forever.
The jewels, I hope, are safe?
Yes. Yes, I've sent them to Marlowe, who keeps the keys of our baggage. You have taken care, I hope, of the casket I sent you to lock up. It's in safety.
Yes, yes, it's safe enough. I have taken care of it. But how could you think the seat of a postcoach at an inn door a place of safety? Ah, numbskull. I have taken better precautions for you than you did for yourself. I have...
What?
I have sent it to the landlady to keep for you.
To the landlady?
The landlady.
You did?
I did.
Farce needs to be played with relentlessly high stakes and in absolute earnest. And on this, Goldsmith, in an age when actors played on the forestage and winked at the audience, gives very modern advice.
I would particularly recommend never to take notice of the audience upon any occasion whatsoever. Let the spectators applaud never so much. Their praises should pass, except at the end of the epilogue, with seeming inattention.
In the same essay, a study of the French actress Clairon, Voltaire's muse, he also gives the still very pertinent technical advice that practicing in front of a mirror will make an actor stiff and affected. People will seldom improve, he pointed out, when they have no model but themselves to copy after. It was a huge effort for Goldsmith to get She Stoops to Conquer produced. Coleman at Covent Garden was sitting on it. He'd produced Goldsmith's only previous play, The Good-Natured Man, which, after being withdrawn and revised, had managed a respectable 10 performances. But in spite of Dr. Johnson loyally saying it was the best piece since Vanbrugh, it wasn't a very satisfactory play. None of the characters really lived, and in its contrived ending and heavy-handed moralising, it was too similar to the sentimental comedies it was trying to oust. But now Goldsmith had written a much more daring play and was desperate to make some money. For God's sake, take the play and let us make the best of it, he wrote to Coleman. Then in desperation took it away, offered it to Garrick at Drury Lane, by which time Dr. Johnson had bullied Coleman to put it on, and finally he agreed. Both Garrick and Coleman were nervous that an audience who enjoyed sentimental comedies would be offended by so boisterous a play, particularly as Goldsmith satirises those very people, attributing their genteel views to the very characters they were most likely to object to, the lowlife of the tavern.
Squire got spunk in him.
We loves to hear him sing, because he never gives us nothing that's low.
Ah, damn anything that's low. I cannot bear it.
A genteel thing is a genteel thing at any time. If so be that a gentleman be's in concatenation, accordingly.
I like the maximum of that, Master Muggins. What? That I'm obligated to dance a bear? A man may be a gentleman for all of that. May this be my poison if my bear ever dances to but the genteelest of tunes.
Here's to that.
Water Parted or the Minuet in Ariadne.
Casting was tricky too. Actors turned down roles because they sensed that Coleman didn't have faith in the play. In the case of Woodward, who was offered the role of Tony Lumpkin, it's probably just as well. He was 56. But Goldsmith was bullish. I should sooner my play were damned by bad players than merely saved by good acting, he said. Well, they got Ned Shooter for Hardcastle, and John Quick, who finally was cast as Tony Lumpkin, delighted Goldsmith. The play was eventually thrown on and was a great popular success and immediately started making shockwaves across the world. In America, John Minshall's play, He Stoops to Conquer, gives us an idea of how Goldsmith's play was perceived. On the one hand as very low comedy, but on the other as political satire. He Stoops is very broad, very low comedy indeed, driven by Tonino, as plump as a partridge and as brown as his feathers, and his female counterpart, who speak almost entirely in absolutely filthy innuendo. But the play also picks up on Goldsmith's use of the word liberty. An Italian says to an Irishman, in your country, your liberty is played with like a shuttlecock, and at best but a toy. Now, Goldsmith would hotly have denied that he was a political writer.
So then you have no turn for politics, I find.
Not in the least. There was a time, indeed, when I fretted myself about the mistakes of government like other people, but finding myself every day grow more angry, and the government growing no better, I left it to mend itself.
But Goldsmith fiercely championed the poor and the underdog. He gave his only blanket to a poor woman and her children while he was at Trinity, Dublin, because he could keep warm by cutting a hole in his mattress and climbing inside. And his long poem, The Deserted Village, takes the part of the dispossessed, fiercely criticises the enclosure of common land by rich landlords. Ye friends to truth, ye statesmen who survey the rich man's joys increase, the poor's decay, 'tis yours to judge how wide the limits stand between a splendid and unhappy land. Yet count our gains. This wealth is but a name that leaves our useful product still the same. Not so the loss. The man of wealth and pride takes up a space that many poor supplied. Space for his lake, his park's extended bounds, space for his horse, equipage and hounds. The robe that wraps his limbs in silken sloth has robbed the neighbouring fields of half their growth. His seat, where solitary sports are seen, indignant spurns the cottage from the green. Around the world each needful product flies, for all the luxuries the world supplies, while thus the land adorned for pleasure all in barren splendour feebly waits the fall. Here, while the courtier glitters in brocade, there the pale artist plies the sickly trade. Here, while the proud their long-drawn pomps display, there the black gibbet glooms beside the way. His insistent, sometimes ironic use of the word liberty in She Stoops to Conquer at a time when Wilkes and liberty was the cry of rioters in London and things were getting ugly across the Atlantic and the Channel was dangerous and new. Beaumarchais hadn't yet written his overtly political Figaro plays. A word or two on the late farce called High Life Below Stairs. The poor affecting the manners of the rich. My Lord Duke and Sir Harry, two footmen who assume these characters, have nothing else to do but to talk like their masters. All the satire is well intended if we regard it as masters ourselves, but probably philosophers would rejoice at the liberty Englishmen give their domestics.
The Athenians, the politest and best-natured people on earth, were the kindest to their slaves. And if a person may judge who has seen the world, English servants are the best treated, because the generality of English gentlemen are the politest under the sun. When Goldsmith finally went to Trinity College, Dublin, there was no money left because his father had taken a characteristic and ruinously generous view of the elopement of 2 of his other children. Don't ask. And so Oliver had to go as a sizar, which meant that he had to be a servant in lieu of paying fees. Used to feeling inadequate and appearing as less than the gentleman he actually was, he made himself popular by overcompensating in his usual boisterous way. And when he was awarded a small exhibition, he blew the lot on a party and then disappeared before being sent down. But he did write some years later of the irony that those learning the liberal arts should at the same time be treated like slaves. Hardcastle's servants are so much part of the family that he really has his work cut out trying to make them pretend to be what they're emphatically not in an attempt to impress the smart city boys he's expecting.
Quite a lot. That's perfectly impossible.
See how Diggory carries his hands. Well, I hope you're perfect in the table exercises I have been teaching you these 3 days. You all know your posts and your places and can show that you've been used to good company without ever stirring from home.
Aye.
When company comes, you're not to pop out and stare and then run in again like frightened rabbits in a warren.
No, no.
You, Diggory, whom I've taken from the barn, are to make a show at the side table, and you, Roger, whom I've advanced from the plough, are to place yourself behind my chair. But you're not to stand so with your hands in your pockets. Take your hands from your pockets, Roger. And from your head, you blockhead, you. See how Diggory carries his hands. They're a little too stiff indeed, but that's no great matter.
Mind how I hold them. I learnt to hold my hands like this when I was upon drill for the militia. And so, being upon drill...
Diggory, you must not be so talkative. You must be all attention to the guests. You must hear us talk and not think of talking. You must see us drink and not think of drinking. And you must see us eat and not think of eating.
By the laws, your worship, that's perfectly impossible. Whenever Diggory sees yeating going forward, he's always wishing for a mouthful himself.
Blockhead, is not a bellyful in the kitchen as good as a bellyful in the parlour? Stay your stomach with that reflection.
Thank you, worship. I'll make a shift to stay my stomach with a slice of cold beef in the pan.
Diggory, you are too talkative. Then, if I happen to say a good thing or tell a good story at table, you're not all to burst out a-laughing as if you made part of the company.
Then, Icard, your worship must not tell the story of old grouse in the gun room. I cannot help laughing. For the soul of me. We've laughed at that these 20 years.
Well, the story is a good one. Well, honest Diggory, you may laugh at that, but still remember to be attentive. Suppose one of the company should call for a glass of wine. How will you behave? A glass of wine, sir, if you please. Hey, why don't you move?
Icard, your worship, I never have the courage till I see the eatables and drinkables brought upon the table. And then I'm as bold as a lion.
What, will nobody move?
I'm not to leave this place. Well, I'm sure it's no place of mine.
You do know mine for sir.
Once, I'm sure it cannot be mine.
Oh, you numbskulls. And so, while like your betters you are quarrelling for places, the guests must be starved. Oh, you dunces, I find I must begin all over again.
So the servants are the only people in the play who aren't lying or pretending or seeming to be something other than they are. Even Marlowe's servants' drunken battle cry,
"Please, Your Honour, liberty in Fleet Street forever!"
is looked on with indulgence by his master. So, no need for revolution in England then. And Goldsmith knew what he was talking about. As early as 1760, he'd predicted the French Revolution. He died almost exactly a year after She Stoops to Conquer opened.
He'd been closely questioning his friends at the club about suicide and had written at length about the death of Socrates. Feverish, he'd been furious that his doctor hadn't given him the fever powders he wanted, but being a doctor himself, he got hold of some and took them anyway. And in a final irony, to prove his point, he took too many and died. "Is your mind at ease?" he was asked at the end. "No, it is not," he replied. He was angry that he'd never been taken seriously enough. He'd not been awarded a pension. He was very generous with his money, but he'd never made enough. He was a mass of unresolved contradictions, really. He both pursued and despised wealth with equal vigour. He was nostalgic about the countryside that he couldn't wait to escape from. Parts of his novel and some of his poems were written with a sprawling sentimentality that looked forward to the 19th century, at the same time as trying to explode the sentimentality of 18th century theatre with his muscular comedy. Boswell, who had resisted his charms for years but was all over him like a rash the moment She Stoops to Conquer was a success, called him a thoughtless scatterbrain, but pointed out to his detractors that Goldsmith had not more envy than other people, but only talked of it freely. Quite apart from his advanced views on theatre, Goldsmith had powerful champions in the immortality stakes. One of the many times he was unable to pay his rent, Dr. Johnson took control, ransacked Goldsmith's papers, and went out to sell the rights to the manuscript of a novel, The Vicar of Wakefield. The novel which Goethe claimed influenced his whole style of writing. Fanny Burney, on the other hand, was disappointed by it, but as it gained in reputation, went back to rewrite that diary entry with a more favourable judgment. The Deserted Village influenced Wordsworth and triggered the whole Romantic movement. And She Stoops to Conquer was turned into a highly successful opera by Sir George Macfarren in the mid-19th century.
O Constance dear, though all things roam, though light forsake the sea, though stars desert the sky, though birds forget to fly, still I'll be true to thee, my love, still I'll be true to thee.
Well, ironically, he turned it into a sentimental piece, which, significantly, has disappeared into obscurity. The play survives because it's fun. And where it touches base with humanity, it's honest. They're all pretending to be what they're not, but that's what actors do, after all. And Goldsmith, unfashionably, recommended truthful acting. He asked Northcote what he thought of She Stoops to Conquer, and Northcote said he wouldn't presume to judge. But did it make you laugh? Northcote said, yes, it did. Then that's all I require. His last publication was a poem called Retaliation, in which he posthumously got back at all the friends who'd attacked him. But it has none of the venom of Alexander Pope, whom Goldsmith so much admired. It's gentle in tone and has a menu in which all his friends are described as dishes brought to a feast. If our landlord supplies us with beef and with fish, let each guest bring himself, and he brings the best dish. Our Garrick's a salad, for in him we see oil, vinegar, sugar, and saltness agree. To make out the dinner, full certain I am that Ridge is anchovy, and Reynolds is lamb, that Hick is a capon, and by the same rule, magnanimous Goldsmith, a gooseberry fool. At a dinner so various, at such a repast, who'd not be a glutton and stick to the last? Here, waiter, more wine, let me sit while I'm able, till all my companions sink under the table. Then with chaos and blunders encircling my head, let me ponder and tell what I think of the dead.
Stoops to let men betray. What charm can soothe her melancholy? What